Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and today I'll take you on a spooky story. But don't worry, it will be a gentle and relaxing journey before you drift off to sleep. If you're looking for a tale that's just mysterious enough and gentle enough to relax to, then you've come to the right place. Now, find yourself a comfortable space, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Story 1: The Forgotten Child. There are moments when you look at your life and it feels like it's suddenly out of focus, like the world around you has blurred just enough to make everything seem a little off. But when you reach out to adjust it, nothing changes. That's how I felt as I walked through my kitchen that morning. The overhead light flickered, a small thing, but unsettling. I'd lived in this house for years, long enough to know that light never flickered. But today, it did. I paused, staring at it, waiting for it to stabilize. When it didn't, I sighed and pulled the string of the blinds aside, letting the sunlight pour in. The glow from the window caught on the dirty dishes I hadn't yet put away from the night before. No surprise there. I hadn't been keeping up with my usual routines, but it wasn't just the dishes. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, like it had been waiting for something. I shook my head, trying to shake the nagging thought that had been following me around for the past few days. I glanced at the clock. 10:34 a.m. I had time to think. Maybe it was just a weird morning. Maybe I hadn't slept well. Or maybe it was because of Oliver. Oliver had moved in with me about 3 weeks ago, after a friend of mine had recommended him as a temporary housemate. He was quiet, polite, and kept mostly to himself. There was something about him that felt familiar, but it wasn't in a comforting way. No, it was more like when you hear a song on the radio, and you know you've heard it before, but you can't place where or when. That discomfort of something lingering at the edge of your memory. And now, his presence in the house seemed to make everything shift. Little things, like the way the kitchen felt colder at night, or how the picture frames seemed slightly off-center, as if someone had touched them while I was asleep. I grabbed my coffee, pacing the kitchen. Maybe I needed to start keeping track of things. There were too many instances of things just changing. It wasn't normal. But the question was, what exactly wasn't normal? The way I kept forgetting things? The way the house seemed different every time I turned around? Or was it something about Oliver? When I got to the hallway, I stopped. There was something on the floor. A piece of clothing, half hidden, behind the rug. A small t-shirt, a kid's t-shirt. It was soft, faded blue, with a small cartoon of a bear on it. I frowned. I didn't own a child's t-shirt, and I didn't know anyone with a child who would leave their clothes in my hallway. My first instinct was to pick it up and toss it in the laundry, but something stopped me. I looked around the hallway, the walls, the picture frames. I had the distinct feeling that something had changed while I wasn't looking. But what? Suddenly, a loud noise startled me. A door opening. Oliver. He had a way of creeping around the house that made me feel like I was always walking in on him, even though I rarely saw him. His room was down the hall, and I turned to see him standing in the doorway of the living room. "Morning," he said, his voice smooth and polite, but a little distant. "Morning," I replied, feeling a chill crawl down my spine. For some reason, his face was unfamiliar to me in that moment. I knew it, but I didn't know it. The details, the way his eyes flickered toward me, the small curve of his mouth when he smiled, it all felt wrong. I looked away, back to the t-shirt on the floor, as if I could distract myself from the unease that was creeping through me. Did you leave a shirt out here? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. His gaze flickered to the t-shirt, then back to me. No, he said. I haven't been in the hallway. I didn't believe him, not because I thought he was lying, but because the way he said it didn't sound right. Like he was answering a question that hadn't been asked yet. I felt my throat tighten, but I swallowed it down, forcing a smile. Okay, thanks. As I bent to pick up the shirt, I heard him step into the living room, his feet shuffling quietly across the floor. I was suddenly aware of the way his footsteps didn't echo the way they should, like the house was absorbing them, swallowing the sound whole. I turned and walked back into the kitchen, still holding the shirt. Something about it felt important. I couldn't explain why. I knew I didn't have a child. I'd never had a child. So why was there a child's shirt in my house? Why did it feel like it belonged to someone I should know? The thought gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside. I needed to think clearly. After a few moments, I sat down at the kitchen table with the shirt in front of me. I grabbed a pen and started to jot down a few notes in a notebook. It felt like the only thing that made sense anymore. Documenting everything, no matter how small. Maybe I could make sense of it that way. The pen scratched against the paper, my handwriting steady but my mind racing. I wrote down the events of the morning, the flickering light, the dishes, the t-shirt on the floor. And then something strange happened. As I wrote, I felt a tug at the back of my mind, as if I was remembering something that was just out of reach. The memory felt fragile, like it was about to break apart if I didn't grab hold of it. But I couldn't. It slipped away, leaving me with nothing but a sense of emptiness. When I looked back down at the page, the words were gone. All of them. The paper was blank. I stared at the page, confusion rising in my chest. How could that happen? I hadn't even left the table. I flipped through the rest of the notebook, hoping it was just one weird page. But every page was the same, blank, as if nothing I'd written had ever existed. My breath caught in my throat as I suddenly felt a presence behind me, too close. I didn't need to look up. I knew it was Oliver. "Everything all right?" he asked. His voice was softer now, almost like he was pretending to care. "Yeah," I whispered, feeling a sharp tremor in my hands. I couldn't tell if I was shaking from fear or from something else. Something was happening. Something I couldn't explain. And I was beginning to realize that no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't going to be able to stop it. The air in the house felt thicker the next morning, like something was hanging just out of reach, waiting to fall. I woke up with the same unsettling sense of déjà vu that had plagued me the day before. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the cold. My blanket, which had been warm just the night before, now felt like a sheet of ice. I sat up quickly, my head spinning. I wasn't sure if it was because of the strange dreams or if I'd simply slept wrong. But as I glanced around the room, everything looked too still, too perfect. I pushed the covers off and stood, stepping onto the cold wooden floor. The house was silent, too silent. There was a faint smell of something sharp and sterile. It wasn't like my usual morning coffee or the faint scent of dust that always seemed to linger in the corners of my rooms. No, this was different. It was a chemical smell, almost like cleaning supplies. But I hadn't used anything like that in days. I hadn't even noticed it last night. I walked toward the kitchen, half expecting to find Oliver there, cooking or making himself a cup of coffee. But the house was empty, as it always seemed to be when I wasn't actively searching for him. I ran my fingers over the countertops, absent-mindedly tracing patterns in the dust that had settled there overnight. That's when I noticed it. A small, simple object sitting near the edge of the kitchen table. A photograph. I frowned as I reached for it. I had no memory of ever seeing this photo before, but it felt like something I should recognize. The edges were slightly bent, and the colors had faded with time. The image itself was of me. At least I thought it was me. I had to squint to confirm, as the face was so young, so different from the face I saw every morning in the mirror. But it was me. There I was, standing in front of a small house with a boy beside me. He was small, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with dark hair and wide, curious eyes. I stared at the photo, my heart racing. Who was he? I didn't know him. I didn't remember having a child. Not like that. The boy in the picture seemed so familiar, but also so distant, as if he belonged to another lifetime entirely. I swallowed hard, the taste in my mouth bitter, as I turned the photo over. There, scribbled in faint ink on the back, was a name. Oliver. I dropped the photo like it had burned me. My mind reeled. It couldn't be. The boy, Oliver, was the same name as the man who'd been staying in my guest room for the past 3 weeks. The same Oliver, the one who made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I tried to steady my breath, gripping the edge of the table as I leaned forward. This doesn't make sense, I whispered to myself, but it felt like the words were coming from someone else. Someone who wasn't quite me. It didn't help that I could hear his footsteps in the hallway again. He was back, always back. I didn't know where he went, but I always knew when he returned. It was as if the space around me shifted whenever he came into it. The subtle pressure in the air, the slight hum that seemed to grow louder the longer he stayed. It was like he was pulling me into his orbit. I stood there for a few moments longer, holding the photograph in my trembling hands, unable to tear my gaze away from the boy in the picture. I could feel the weight of the world pushing down on me, but I didn't know why. The sound of Oliver's footsteps stopped right behind me. I turned around slowly, and there he was, standing in the kitchen doorway, watching me with those same dark, unreadable eyes. "Did you find it?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost too calm. I didn't respond immediately. The photo was still in my hands, but it felt heavy now, like it was pulling me down into something I wasn't ready to face. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, like the air in the room thickened just because he was near. "It's okay," he said almost soothingly. "You'll remember. It's just a matter of time." I wanted to say something, to demand an explanation, but the words wouldn't come. The image of the boy in the photograph clung to my mind, seeping into every thought, every corner of my consciousness. But it wasn't just the boy. It was the feeling that came with him. A memory I couldn't access. A memory that had been lost, hidden away by something far darker than I had yet realized. I don't remember him," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. Oliver didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked almost sad. "You will?" he repeated, and this time his voice held something else, a kind of certainty that sent a chill down my spine. You just have to fight to remember. The words felt wrong, too simple, as if the truth of everything was just out of my reach, waiting for me to claim it. But how could I remember something I had no recollection of? A child, a son, a life I didn't know I'd lived? I dropped the photograph onto the table, my fingers numb. How do you know all of this? I asked, my voice shaky. Why don't I remember? Why are these things happening to me? Oliver took a step back, his expression becoming distant. Because there are forces out there, he said as if speaking to someone far away. Forces that can erase things. People, memories, entire lives. They take what's precious to you and make it vanish, like it was never there. And they do it without you even realizing. But not everything can be erased, Leah. Not everything. He said my name like it had meaning. Like I wasn't just another person he was talking to. It was the first time he'd used it in weeks. And hearing it like that sent a shiver through me. I took a step back, the weight of the situation finally beginning to settle in. Why? I asked, the question echoing in my mind. Why would someone do that? Why would they erase him from my life? Oliver didn't answer right away. He looked down at the floor, his face tight with something I couldn't place. Regret? Sadness? Because it's easier to forget than to face the truth. Some things are too painful to remember. I felt a sudden rush of panic. If the boy was my son, then where had he gone? Why couldn't I remember? And why was Oliver, who was now standing before me like a shadow from my forgotten past, suddenly so important? The silence between us stretched out, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I had to know. I had to understand what had been taken from me. But I didn't know how. Oliver's gaze met mine again. And for the first time, I saw something flicker there. Something almost human. Something like the boy in the photograph. We'll fight, he said quietly. But we'll need to remember first. The days were beginning to blur together. One moment, it felt like I was on the edge of understanding. And the next, the rug was being pulled out from beneath me again. My memory, that fragile thread that held everything together, was unraveling in small, painful chunks. I couldn't tell where I ended and where the confusion began. It was becoming harder to trust anything. My surroundings, my thoughts, even the way I remembered the people closest to me. I spent the night writing again, my pen moving furiously across the pages of the journal. I didn't know why I felt the need to document everything, but I did. The words seemed to form themselves, pouring out of me like a flood, like I was desperately trying to capture every moment before it slipped away entirely. I wrote about the photograph of the boy, Oliver, my memories of him, memories that didn't feel like my own. They felt like something I had been told, something I had seen in a dream. The boy in the photo, he was mine. He had to be. But why couldn't I remember him? I paused, the pen hovering above the page as a thought occurred to me. There was a name I kept hearing in the back of my mind, a name that was always just out of reach. It wasn't Oliver's, it wasn't the boy's, it was my own. Leah. The name echoed in my head, too loud, too insistent. Why was I so disconnected from it? I shook my head, trying to push the thought aside. The walls of my house felt like they were closing in on me. The silence was suffocating. Everything had become so eerily quiet. Too quiet. When I looked up, I saw the light from the hallway spilling through the crack of the door. The faint shadow of someone moving just outside. My heart skipped. It was Oliver. He was there again, like he always was. I didn't know what to expect anymore. But every time he appeared, my pulse quickened. I stood, the journal still clutched in my hand, and made my way toward the door. I opened it slowly, peering out into the dark hallway. There was nothing there. No Oliver. No one. The house seemed to breathe in the stillness, its shadows long and looming. But as I stepped into the hallway, something caught my eye. There, on the wall next to the door, were faint marks, scratches, or maybe scrawls. I moved closer, my pulse rising, the hairs on the back of my neck standing at attention. The writing wasn't in any recognizable language. It was jagged, messy, almost like someone had hurriedly etched something into the wall. My breath hitched as I ran my fingers over the marks. They felt familiar, not in a comforting way, but in a way that made my stomach twist. Leah. I gasped, my fingers trembling as I traced the word. It was the same name. My name. But how? Who could have written it there? I hadn't seen the marks before. I knew I hadn't. I stepped back, my mind racing. My gaze darted around the hallway, but the shadows only seemed deeper, more impenetrable. The house felt colder now. The air was heavier. I turned toward the living room, the place where I spent most of my time now, where I had started to feel the strange shifts in reality. The sofa, the table, the shelves. Everything had an almost sterile, unreal quality. Like they didn't belong to me. Like they were props in a play that I was barely able to comprehend. I heard the sound of a door creaking open from somewhere in the house, followed by the soft footfalls of someone moving quietly through the rooms. My heart rate spiked. Oliver. But when I went to check, no one was there. The house remained eerily still, as though it was holding its breath. I turned back to the hallway and froze. The marks were no longer just on the wall. They were everywhere, scratched into the surface of the doorframe, smeared across the floor, even on the back of the living room couch. It was as if the house itself was being consumed by the strange writing. And then it hit me. The realization that I had been here before, seen this before, and yet I didn't remember it. The words seemed to be burrowing into my mind, filling up the empty spaces where memories should be. The panic was starting to set in. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my journal, flipping through the pages desperately. Maybe, just maybe, I had written something about this. Maybe I had documented these shifts before they started happening. But as I flipped through the pages, my stomach sank. The journal was blank. The words I had written the night before, gone. Not a trace of them. The paper was as clean as it had been the day I bought it. A sudden noise behind me made me whirl around. Oliver was standing in the doorway now, watching me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on me, like he was waiting for something. Something I couldn't quite grasp. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My mind was a tangled mess of thoughts, none of them coherent. The writing on the walls, the missing entries, the photo of the boy. I couldn't connect the dots anymore. Oliver stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "You're remembering, Leah," he said softly. "The memories are trying to come back, but the force is fighting you. You have to keep writing. You have to hold on to everything." I wanted to shout at him, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. I felt like I was choking on them, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I don't know what's real anymore, I whispered, my voice trembling. You have to trust the pieces, he said. They're scattered, but they're still yours. You have to remember. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but every time I tried to focus, I saw the boy again, his face so clear in my mind. I saw the photograph, the name, Oliver, and I saw the word etched into the walls. Leah. Leah. I opened my eyes again. The house was still the same, shifting, changing, breathing with an almost malicious intent. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something deep and dark, something I wasn't sure I could ever escape. I will help you, Oliver said, but you have to keep fighting. You can't let them take you, Leah. And with that, I understood. I had been fighting something all along. Something that wanted to erase me, to erase my past, my memories, and the boy who had been mine. I didn't know if I could win, but I couldn't let go. Not now. With a trembling hand, I picked up the journal again, the weight of it heavier than ever before. I had to write. I had to remember. Or everything I loved would be lost. But as I began to write, the words blurred on the page. Something was wrong. Something was already slipping away. I had to hurry. I had to hold on to the truth before it was gone forever. Story 2. When Death Walks in the Pub wasn't much to look at. It sat on a corner of a quiet street, wedged between a forgotten newsstand and a crumbling theater that hadn't shown a film in years. The windows were smudged, the brickwork cracked and faded, and the neon sign that said Ale and Lagers flickered intermittently, a grim reminder of how little business it brought in these days. I'd started working there after the journalism dream hit a wall. It wasn't that I minded. The regulars were familiar, their stories comfortable, predictable even. There was a rhythm to it all that was almost comforting in its mundanity, but that was before he walked in. It was one of those grey, overcast afternoons when the sky felt too heavy, the air too thick, as though everything was waiting for something to happen. I was wiping down the counter, watching the rain pelt against the window like the tapping of unseen fingers. When the door opened with a dull creak, he stood there for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dim lighting. He wore a beige mac, the kind that always seemed to belong to someone trying too hard to blend in. His trilby, slightly askew, only added to the impression of someone who couldn't quite manage to be inconspicuous. He shuffled in, his footsteps muffled by the worn carpet, and made his way to the bar. He didn't speak at first, just leaned against the counter, his hands folded in front of him as if he were waiting for someone. But I knew better than to ask questions. "Pint of ale," he said, his voice low and without any particular accent, though the words felt cold, calculated, as though they'd been rehearsed. I poured the beer, set it in front of him, and waited. "Jim Wardle still around?" he asked suddenly, his eyes scanning the pub like a hawk searching for prey. I was taken aback for a moment. Jim Wardle. He'd been a regular at the pub, a grizzled old man who would spend hours hunched over his pint, murmuring to anyone who would listen about his days in the army. He'd died just a few weeks ago. Heart attack, they said. No one had really taken it well, though it didn't make much difference. People died. That was how it went. "Jim's gone," I replied, wiping my hands on the rack. He passed away. Heart attack a month ago. The man nodded slowly, taking a sip of his beer, his expression unreadable. Ah, shame, he muttered almost to himself. Then, as if the thought had only just occurred to him, he added, "What about Ged Bunnett?" Ged, the guy who could drink anyone under the table without breaking a sweat. He had died a week ago. Some kind of stroke or aneurysm, they said. It had been sudden, but it wasn't the first time someone had dropped like that. Not in my line of work. Ged passed too, just last week. Same thing. Heart-related, I think, I said, my eyes narrowing as I spoke. The man's questions felt too specific, too calculated. He hadn't asked about anyone else before those two, and he hadn't even seemed interested in the general banter of the pub. He didn't respond to that, just stared into his glass as if he were lost in thought. I could see his reflection in the darkened surface of the beer, distorted and stretched. Something about it sent a chill down my spine. I forced myself to look away. Over the next week, he came back. He wasn't a regular at first, but he started showing up with a strange consistency. Every few days, like clockwork, he'd slip through the door, his beige Mac trailing in his wake like a ghost. And he'd always ask about someone. Sometimes it was Jim, sometimes it was Ged, and sometimes it was someone else I didn't even remember. Sam Morgan, for example. She'd been a loud, boisterous woman who spent every Friday evening in the pub. She'd recently gotten engaged to some guy from out of town. She wasn't around much these days, but the man in the beige Mac had asked about her, too. "Is Sam Morgan still coming by?" he'd asked one day, his eyes flicking to the empty corner where she used to sit, her laughter filling the space. I frowned. Sam? She was in the hospital recovering from an accident. Near fatal, but she'd made it. At least, that's what I'd heard. "No, she's not. She's in the hospital. Had a bad accident last week." The man didn't say anything for a long time, just stared at me over the rim of his glass, the silence stretching between us like something thick and heavy. He seemed to be calculating something, as if he were weighing the information I gave him against something else I couldn't see. I thought about him for the rest of the day. His questions were always about people who were gone or going. And every time he asked, it felt like another piece of the puzzle was falling into place. But I couldn't make sense of it. Couldn't bring myself to understand what his interest in the dead was. Why he kept coming back, asking the same questions over and over again. It didn't make sense. And then, something strange happened. Sam Morgan didn't die. She survived the accident. I ran into her at the hospital a few days later, sitting up in bed, complaining about how bored she was. I told her about the man in the beige Mac, and she laughed it off. But I could see the unease in her eyes. She'd been close to death, sure, but she was alive. And I had to wonder, was I the one losing my mind? Or was something else at play here? The man didn't come around for a few days after that. But when I finally returned to work, after a brief stint at the doctor's for what turned out to be a mild case of appendicitis, he was back, sitting in his usual spot at the end of the bar, staring into his glass. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. He didn't look at me this time, didn't ask about the regulars. Instead, he simply muttered, "You're still here?" Something in his tone unsettled me. I didn't answer him. I turned away, back to my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. something about the way he spoke, the way he moved, the way he lingered as though waiting for something to happen. The man in the beige Mac continued his visits to the pub, never changing his routine. He'd sit at the far end of the bar, a shadow among shadows, always asking about someone else. It had been almost a month since I'd first noticed him, but I still hadn't quite figured him out. The questions were always the same, about someone who was gone, about someone who had just disappeared or passed away. Each time, the sense of unease crept further under my skin, a constant itch I couldn't scratch. I tried to tell myself that I was overreacting, that there had to be some logical explanation for his behavior. Maybe he was just a lonely man who found comfort in the lives of the people around him, following the gossip of a town that seemed to constantly chew through its own history. But even as I told myself these things, I couldn't shake the suspicion that there was something far darker lurking beneath the surface. One evening, he came in earlier than usual, just after the dinner rush. The pub was quiet for a change, the only sounds being the clink of glasses and the hum of the low jazz music playing from the jukebox in the corner. I was leaning over the counter, wiping down the already clean surface, when I noticed him standing just inside the door, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for something or someone. When our eyes met, I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, the kind you get when you realize you've been watched for too long. He was standing still, motionless, like a statue with that same beige Mac and Trilby. The faint light from the overhead lamps bounced off the brim of his hat, casting shadows over his face that made his features seem more like an impression than a person. He walked over to the bar, his shoes making a soft, almost eerie sound on the floor. I set the rag down, trying to shake off the feeling that he wasn't just another customer. "Pint," he said, not looking at me, but rather glancing around the pub, as if he was searching for something, or perhaps waiting for someone. "Sure," I said, pulling the pint, though my hands were trembling just slightly. I tried to steady them, but it was no use. I felt like I was on edge, waiting for the inevitable moment when he would ask about someone else who had died. I set the glass in front of him, and for a long moment, he just stared at it without taking a sip. Then finally, his voice broke the silence again. "You know a man named John Hanley?" he asked, his eyes still on the beer. John Hanley? The name was unfamiliar. I had to search my memory, but nothing came to mind. "Don't think so," I said slowly. "Who's he?" The man shifted slightly in his seat, his eyes narrowing. "Ah, never mind then," he said with a half-hearted chuckle, as if the whole conversation had been a joke that only he understood. I watched him carefully, wondering if the question had been important, if he'd been testing me. I had no idea who this John Hanley was, but I knew that wasn't really the point. The pattern was unmistakable by now. First Jim, then Ged, Sam, the way he'd asked about them, and then, every single time, something had happened to them. I pushed the thought out of my head. Maybe it was a coincidence. Or maybe I was just reading too much into things. I was halfway through my shift when a small group of regulars wandered in. It was a Wednesday night, and they were usually good for a few rounds before heading home. They'd been coming for years. Old faces, familiar voices. Jim's spot at the bar had been empty ever since his death. But tonight, it looked like the seat was about to be taken. The man in the beige mac shifted, straightening his shoulders as if he were about to rise. But then he stopped, his gaze moving toward the door as the group filed in. I caught the look in his eyes, the slight narrowing of his pupils as he watched them. His fingers twitched, a small involuntary movement, and I couldn't help but notice how quickly his hand moved to his coat pocket, his fingers disappearing inside. He stayed seated as the group approached, and for the first time, I felt like there was a heavy, invisible line between us, something I couldn't cross without feeling its weight. "Who are they?" I asked, trying to mask my curiosity, trying to fill the silence. The man turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Old friends of Gates," he said, his voice just a little too calm, too rehearsed. I heard he passed, figured I'd come and pay my respects. "Right," I replied. But I wasn't convinced. I was never convinced. Something about the way he spoke felt like a rehearsal, each word slipping out too easily, too carefully. The group settled into the seats by the door, ordering their drinks and starting up their usual chatter. I kept an eye on them, half listening as they talked. But all the while, my attention kept drifting back to the man in the beige mac. It wasn't just his questions. It was the way he held himself, the way he blended into the background like a ghost, like he was there, but not really part of it. And it was the way he watched them. For a moment, I thought he was going to speak again, maybe ask about someone else who had died. But instead, he just sat there, silent, staring into his glass, as though he had forgotten how to be human. Or maybe he was waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. The unease had built up too much, the paranoia making my mind race with every possible scenario. "I'll be back in a second," I muttered to no one in particular, slipping behind the bar and making my way into the back room. I needed a moment to breathe, to clear my head, but even as I shut the door behind me, I could still feel his presence. It lingered, oppressive, as if he were watching me through the walls. I paced the small room, running my hands through my hair, trying to make sense of everything. Why had he kept coming back? Why did he ask about the dead? And why did I feel like he was waiting for something? The minutes passed, each one dragging on longer than the last. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer. I pushed the door open, ready to face him, ready to confront whatever this was. But when I stepped out into the bar, I saw that he was already gone. There was no trace of him. The stool where he had been sitting was empty. I blinked, confused. I didn't know what to make of it. Was it over? Had he left for good? But as I looked at the group by the door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. They were looking around, confused, asking each other if anyone had seen the man who'd been sitting at the bar, the one who'd been asking about Ged. I didn't have an answer for them. I should have known it was never going to end. You'd think a person would learn to recognize the signs of something not quite right. The prickle at the back of your neck, the irrationality creeping under your skin, the way a shadow lingers too long. I've learned to ignore a lot of things over the years, but I couldn't ignore this. When I walked into the pub that evening, the same unease gripped me like a vice. The usual clink of glasses, the low murmur of conversation, it was all the same, but it felt off. There was a new kind of tension hanging in the air, like static before a storm. I wiped my hands on the rag and glanced at the clock. 6:47 p.m. There was still time before the evening crowd started filtering in, but for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I pushed the thought away. I was just being paranoid. It had been days since the man in the beige Mac had left, and he hadn't come back. Everything was fine, or at least it was supposed to be. But then the door opened, and I saw him again. He walked in just like before, wearing the same beige Mac, the same old trilby, tilted low over his face. It was like no time had passed at all. The moment he stepped across the threshold, my pulse quickened, and the hairs on my arms stood up. I'd been telling myself it was all a coincidence, that I was just reading too much into his questions, his bizarre interest in the regulars. But seeing him now, I couldn't help but feel like I'd been waiting for this moment all along. He didn't look at me as he entered, his gaze scanning the room with the same calculating air, like he was assessing something no one else could see. He paused for a second, his eyes briefly lingering on the empty spot where Jim Wardle used to sit. Then, without a word, he moved toward the bar, taking a seat with deliberate slowness. I forced myself to breathe. I had to stay calm. I didn't want him to know that I'd been watching him, that I knew what his presence meant. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was mocking me, that this was all part of some sick joke I wasn't in on. He sat down, placed his hat on the bar, and waited. It was like clockwork, the same routine. The pub was quiet, too quiet. The dim lighting, the familiar hum of conversation from the few scattered patrons. It all felt too familiar, too normal. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't place it. My thoughts spiraled. This man, this stranger, wasn't just asking questions anymore. He was part of the pattern, the deaths, the disappearances. It was like he was orchestrating it all. Jim Wardle, Ged Barnett, Sam Morgan, all of them had died after he'd asked about them. Sam had somehow managed to survive her accident, but I hadn't stopped wondering why she was the one to break the pattern. He had to be connected to it. That much was certain, but I didn't want to admit it. Not to myself. I couldn't. I caught myself staring at him, my heart pounding in my chest as his cold, detached eyes turned toward me. He'd been aware of me the whole time. Same again, he said, his voice low and calm, as if he were talking to a stranger. No hint of recognition, no emotion in his words. It was like we were all just characters in some mundane play, moving through the same motions over and over. I nodded and turned to grab the pint glass, trying to steady my shaking hands. I wasn't sure why it felt like the world was tilting beneath me, but every moment felt drawn out, as if time itself was slowly warping around him. I placed the glass in front of him. "Anything on your mind?" I asked, forcing the words past my dry throat. He didn't answer immediately. He just picked up the glass, studying the amber liquid as if it held the answers to something he hadn't yet figured out. After a long pause, he looked up at me. His eyes were colder than they had ever been, dark and hollow, like the bottom of a well. "I was wondering about Susan Clark," he said, his tone casual, almost too casual, like he'd asked about 1,000 people before her. I froze. Susan Clark? I hadn't heard that name in years. She'd been a regular in the pub before she disappeared without a trace. No one had ever known exactly what had happened to her. Just one day, she was gone, and no one spoke of her again. It wasn't like the others. There hadn't been any explanation, Just silence. Sorry, I don't know much about her, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Not sure where she went, but the look in his eyes told me he knew more than I did. He always knew more. The way he watched me, almost as if he was studying me, evaluating my every word. It unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. Of course, he said, taking a sip of the beer. I imagine people don't like to talk about her. She was always a bit of an outlier. Outlier? That was the first time I'd heard anyone describe her like that. It felt wrong, like he was just spinning another web, pulling me deeper into his game. Before I could respond, a familiar voice broke through the tension. Tommy, hey, good to see you back. I turned to see Greg Carter, a regular, who used to work as a mechanic down the road, waving from a table by the window. He was with his wife, Linda, and a few other friends. The pub had started to fill up now, and the low chatter was returning to normal, but I couldn't focus on that. All I could hear was the man's voice in my head, repeating the name Susan Clark over and over like some kind of incantation. I glanced at the stranger again. His eyes were following Greg and his group, now fully intent on the conversation they were having. But I knew the moment was coming. The moment I'd been dreading. He would ask again. It would be someone else. Someone whose name still lingered in the air like a curse. I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand it, and then, as if fate itself was playing with me, I heard it. Jim. Waddle, he said almost to himself, as if he'd been waiting for the right moment. What happened to him? The words hung in the air like smoke. The room seemed to go still, the air thick with an uncomfortable silence. It was like everyone in the pub had held their breath, waiting for me to answer. I looked around at the regulars, their faces uncertain. They all knew about Jim. They all remembered. I tried to ignore the way my heart had begun to race, my palms sweating as I leaned against the counter. He had a heart attack, I said, the words feeling heavier than I expected. It was sudden, just one of those things. But the man in the beige mac didn't seem convinced. I see, he murmured, almost too quietly for anyone else to hear. And for the first time since I'd met him, I felt something more than just unease. It was fear. Real fear. I knew it then. The pattern wasn't over. It was just beginning. Story 3. A case before dying. I came to this city on a whim. Well, not entirely a business trip, yes, but it felt like more than that. There's a kind of weight that comes with staring at your own life from a distance, like watching a movie that you can't turn off, but you're not sure if you even want to anymore. There's a numbing comfort in the indifference of it all. I was in Chicago when it hit me. The city felt like it was choking me. The crowds, like an endless sea of bodies, each one disconnected from the next. My marriage had been falling apart for months, maybe longer, but I only began to feel the weight of it when I was sitting in a hotel room, staring at the cold gray sky outside the window. The phone calls had slowed the texts even more, so I told myself I needed to get away for a while, clear my head, but all that really meant was running from everything that was wrong. When I arrived at the hotel bar later that evening, the weight still clung to me. I wasn't sure why I even bothered. The glass in front of me, filled with amber liquid, had been sitting there untouched for over half an hour. I stared into it, watching the ice slowly melt, the small cubes spinning idly, as if they too had lost interest in their own existence. A man's reflection stared back at me from the glass hollow eyes. A beard that hadn't been trimmed in days. Shoulders hunched like someone who was tired of carrying a weight they weren't sure they could put down. I wasn't sure how long I sat there like that before she walked in. I've always been a sucker for people watching, but Maggie was different. She wasn't the kind of person who blended into the crowd. Her entrance was almost deliberate, drawing the gaze of everyone around her. She didn't even look at the rest of the bar. Her focus was absolute, walking with a grace that felt rehearsed but effortless at the same time. It wasn't long before she was sitting across from me, her eyes locking with mine in a way that made my heart skip. She didn't speak at first, just let the silence stretch out between us. She had this confidence about her, a subtle strength in the way she moved, like she was a storm waiting to happen. "You look like someone who needs a drink," she said, her voice low and smooth, but with an edge that made me question whether she was mocking me or genuinely curious. I blinked momentarily, caught off guard. I hadn't expected anyone to speak to me, let alone someone like her. "I'm fine." I mumbled the words, leaving my mouth before I even thought about them. She raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "You don't look fine." There was no defensiveness in her voice, no challenge, just an observation. She wasn't trying to push me into talking, but there was a strange pressure, like I had to say something, anything, just to avoid feeling like a complete fool. I sighed, putting my drink down and rubbing my forehead. "Just things are falling apart, you know." Her eyes softened for a brief moment and she nodded, almost like she understood. Everyone's life falls apart at some point. Doesn't mean it has to stay that way. It was such a simple thing to say, yet the way she said it made me believe it. I was looking for some kind of connection, even if it was just temporary. She seemed to know that. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "What's got you so off balance?" I didn't want to tell her. Hell, I wasn't even sure why I was telling her at all. But I did. It spilled out like water from a cracked dam. And once I started, it didn't stop. I told her about my marriage, how it was crumbling under the weight of everything unspoken, how I could feel it slipping through my fingers like sand, no matter how hard I tried to hold on to it. I talked about the emptiness, the disconnection, the way my life felt like a string of events that no longer held any meaning. Through it all, Maggie listened. She didn't judge, didn't interrupt. She just sat there, letting me empty myself onto the table, her eyes watching me with an intensity that was both comforting and unsettling. When I finally stopped, I realized how much I had said. Too much. Probably I glanced up at her, unsure of what to expect. But all she did was smile, softly. "That's a heavy load," she said quietly. "But you're still standing." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. Instead, I picked up my glass, and for the first time that night, I took a long drink. Maggie didn't press. She just let the conversation linger in the air like smoke, dense but not choking. We sat in silence for a while, and I thought, maybe that was it. Maybe that would be the end of it. But then, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke again. "I think you're looking for something here," she said, her voice now low and almost conspiratorial. "You came here for a reason. You're trying to run from something, but deep down, you're still hoping to find something that'll make it all make sense." I chuckled, a bitter, hollow sound. Maybe? Or maybe I just need to forget for a little while. Her eyes locked onto mine, dark and unreadable. Maybe forgetting is exactly what you need. Or maybe you need to remember something you've forgotten. I didn't understand what she meant, but before I could ask, she stood up. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic. As she walked towards the door, I watched her go, feeling the pull in my chest. The strange connection that had formed in the space of an hour. I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I had to follow her. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and made my way outside. The night air hit me with a chill, but it didn't bother me. I was too caught up in the strange mix of emotions coursing through me, curiosity, confusion, and something darker, something more primal. I turned the corner and saw her standing in the alley, her silhouette illuminated by the dim streetlights. She didn't say anything, just nodded for me to come closer. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Maggie, I asked, the uncertainty in my voice barely hidden. She didn't answer at first. Then she spoke, her voice low and almost teasing. You're not the only one who's running from something, but I don't think you'll like what you find if you keep following me. Before I could process her words, she led me further into the alley, and I followed her without hesitation. There was something in the way she moved, the way she spoke, that made me feel like I had no choice but to keep going. When we rounded the next corner, my breath caught in my throat. There in the shadows lay the body, the unmistakable outline of a man, mangled and torn, discarded like garbage. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. Maggie stood beside me, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. This, she said, is what happens when you forget too much. I felt my knees buckle, the shock of it sending a wave of nausea through me. But before I could react, she turned to face me and her lips brushed against mine in a kiss that I couldn't have resisted if I tried. And then, just like that, everything changed. In the silence that followed, I realized that I hadn't just followed her into the night. I had followed her into something much darker. The city lights flickered like distant stars, an endless sea of neon casting shadows that danced across the streets of Hong Kong should have been beautiful, or at the very least mesmerizing. But all I felt was a deep sense of unease, like I was watching life from a distance, detached from everything around me. I had only been in the city for 3 days, but the weight of my failed marriage and the emptiness of my career had already begun to suffocate me. The hotel room felt like a coffin, its sterile walls closing in with every minute I spent in it. I couldn't focus on work, not when my mind kept wandering back to Maggie. She had left a mark on me, one I wasn't sure I could shake, no matter how hard I tried. I didn't know what to expect when I ran into her again, or if I even wanted to. But as I walked through the crowded streets of Tsimsha, trying to clear my head, I saw her. She was standing in front of a street vendor, her back to me, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a veil. She hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment I thought about just walking away, pretending I hadn't seen her. But I didn't. Something in me, something deep, something I couldn't quite explain, pulled me toward her. She turned, her eyes locking onto mine as though she had been waiting for me. A slight smile tugged at the corners of her lips, the same smile that had intrigued me at the bar, the same smile that had made me feel like I was walking into something I didn't fully understand. "You're following me," she said, her voice soft, but with an unmistakable edge to it. I tried to brush it off. I didn't mean to. Just happened to be in the same place. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she tilted her head, studying me. Sure, just happened. I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed silent. It wasn't until she stepped closer that I realized how little personal space she needed. She was close enough, that I could feel the heat of her body, and yet it wasn't comforting. It was almost suffocating. She didn't give me a chance to speak before she grabbed my arm, her grip firm but not painful. "Come with me," she said, her voice low, almost intimate. "I have something to show you." I didn't know why, but I followed her. Something about her made it impossible not to. We walked in silence for what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the bustling city fading into the background. The streets became quieter, less crowded. I started to feel like I was entering a different world altogether. Maggie led me through narrow alleys, her pace never slowing, never faltering. It wasn't until we reached a darkened corner, the air thick with the stench of garbage and decay, that she stopped. I looked around, unease creeping up my spine. "Where are we?" She didn't answer at first, just stood there, her back to me, staring into the darkness. "This is where things end," she finally said, her voice colder than I had ever heard it. I stepped closer instinctively, wanting to reach out, but I didn't. There was something off about this place, about her. "Things?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable, people mostly. Her eyes flicked toward the shadows like William. At the mention of his name, something inside me snapped. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a sudden coldness settle in my stomach. William, my colleague, my friend. Hadn't he gone missing a few days ago? I took a step back. "Where is he?" "What do you mean, like?" William. Maggie didn't answer immediately. She only nodded toward the darkness, her eyes never leaving mine. Without a word, she turned and walked into the alley, motioning for me to follow. Against my better judgment, I did. The further we went, the more the air seemed to change. It wasn't just the smell or the dampness of the walls. It was something else, something I couldn't quite place. The light from the street lamps seemed distant, flickering weakly as though trying to hold on to its last remnants of power. And then I saw it. A body. The figure was crumpled in the shadows, half hidden by a pile of discarded boxes. But even from a distance, I could tell it wasn't just a body. It was William. His clothes were torn, blood staining the ground beneath him. His face, once familiar, was now barely recognizable, twisted in a way that made my stomach churn. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. I froze, unable to breathe. For a moment, everything around me went silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city, but it felt miles away. I couldn't focus. My mind was screaming, but my body refused to move. Maggie stood beside me, her face impassive. She didn't look disturbed, didn't flinch. It was as if this was just another part of her world, something she'd seen before. "Do you see it now?" she asked quietly, her voice cutting through the fog in my mind. "Do you understand why I brought you here?" I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My legs felt like they might give way beneath me. "Maggie, what happened to him?" I managed to choke out. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she crouched down beside the body, her fingers brushing lightly against the blood-stained clothes. "I knew him," she said simply, as if it was no big deal. "He was mine once." The words didn't sink in at first. What did she mean by mine? Had she been involved with him? The implication was there, but I couldn't process it. "You, what happened to him?" I repeated, my voice rising now. She stood up slowly, her eyes meeting mine with an unreadable expression. "He wasn't meant to be here. He didn't know how to leave things behind. Some people can't let go of what they've done." I felt dizzy, the world around me spinning as if I was trapped in a nightmare. I couldn't escape from Maggie's hand reached out, then brushing my cheek lightly. It was an oddly tender gesture, but it made my skin crawl. "You're still in shock," she said softly, her thumb tracing a line along my jaw. "You'll understand soon enough. But for now, let me help you forget." Before I could react, she kissed me. The kiss was different from the one at the bar. It wasn't tender or soft. It was demanding, desperate, as though she was trying to pull something from me. I should have pulled away. Should have screamed, but I didn't. I couldn't. It was like I was drowning in her, unable to breathe, unable to think. When she pulled away, my head was spinning. My heart was racing, and as she stepped back, I saw it, the knife. It gleamed in her hand, its blade catching the faint light from the street lamps. I opened my mouth to speak, but it was too late. She was already moving, the blade flashing through the air with terrifying speed. Pain exploded through my chest as I gasped for breath, my vision blurring. I couldn't understand what was happening. Was this a dream? Was I dying? Her voice was the last thing I heard, low and mocking. "I told you, Terry, people like us don't get to walk away." And then everything went black. I woke up in a haze. The sharp, acrid scent of something burning clung to the back of my throat, mixing with the lingering metallic taste of blood. My head was pounding, and every inch of my body ached as though I had been thrown into a fight I had no chance of winning. For a long moment, I couldn't remember where I was or even what had happened. My mind felt clouded, disjointed. The city noise, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional shout of a vendor. These sounds seemed distant, muffled, like they were coming from another world altogether. Then it hit me, Maggie. The kiss. The knife. I jerked upright, gasping for air, my breath shallow and frantic. My chest burned, but the pain wasn't just physical. It was emotional, raw. It was the kind of ache that came from losing something. Someone before you even had the chance to understand what it was. I had been betrayed. I had trusted her for no reason, other than the simple fact that she had looked at me the way she did, the way no one had in years. I glanced around. The world was blurry, and I could barely make out the edges of the room. It wasn't the alley. It wasn't anywhere I recognized. I was in a bed, an unfamiliar bed. White sheets, cheap hotel decor. My shirt was gone, replaced with a bandage wrapped tightly around my chest. I could feel the sticky warmth of the blood beneath, and panic crept in again, surging through me like a wave. Where was Maggie? Where was the knife? I looked to my left and froze. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the skyline of Hong Kong, her silhouette framed by the orange glow of the city lights. Her posture was still almost statuesque, like she had been sitting there for hours. It felt like I was looking at a ghost, at something impossible, something I couldn't quite comprehend. "You're awake," she said, her voice so casual, so detached as though nothing had happened. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, and the words wouldn't come. I wanted to scream at her, ask her why demand to know how this happened, but instead I felt the strangest sensation, a sinking feeling in my gut, like a deep yawning void was opening up inside me. "Why did you do it?" My voice was hoarse, ragged. She didn't answer immediately. She kept staring out the window, her eyes unfocused, like she was lost in her own thoughts. I wanted to reach for her, to shake her, to make her answer me, but I couldn't. The pain in my chest was growing stronger by the second, a constant throb that stole my focus I needed to. She finally said, her voice low, "You were never meant to understand." "Not really." I blinked, trying to process the words. What did she mean? The room felt colder now, the silence between us stretching out like an unspoken tension. I wanted to ask more questions, to demand answers, but something inside me, some deep primal part of me, was afraid of the answers. I knew deep down that whatever she said would shatter whatever fragile illusion of safety I had left. I turned my head slightly, my body protesting with every movement, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know what had happened. I had to understand. You killed William, didn't you? My voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough. She didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly turned to face me, her eyes sharp and calculating, like she had already anticipated my question. Not in the way you think, she said, her lips curling into a faint smile. He was always meant to die. It was just a matter of timing. I stared at her, my chest tightening as the weight of her words settled over me. You knew what was going to happen. You planned this. Maggie stood up, moving with a grace that was almost predatory. She approached me slowly, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she circled the bed. I could hear the rhythm of her footsteps, each one measured, deliberate, like she was savoring the moment. You should have known, she said, her voice almost a whisper. People like me don't just appear out of nowhere. I didn't plan anything. I just did what was necessary. What was always meant to happen. I shivered despite myself. There was something cold, something dangerous in her words, in the way she moved. She wasn't just some woman in a bar, some fleeting connection I'd made in the haze of my loneliness. She was something else, something darker, something that shouldn't have existed in my world. My heart hammered in my chest and my throat tightened. But why me? Why get involved with me? Maggie stopped, standing at the edge of the bed now, her eyes never leaving mine. Because you were weak, and because you needed to be involved. Don't you understand? People like you, people who are lost, who are already broken inside, they're the ones who get dragged into the chaos. You were the perfect target. Her words cut through me like a blade, but they weren't just sharp. They were true. I had been drifting. I had been looking for a way out of the life I had built for myself, and she had given me that escape, only to reveal that there was no escape at all. I couldn't understand it. I didn't want to. But something inside me, something dark and primal, told me that this was just the beginning. I had been part of something I couldn't begin to comprehend. Maggie wasn't just some woman I had met by chance. She was the catalyst, the force that had been pulling the strings all along. And now, I was too deep in it to turn back. What happens now? I asked, my voice trembling. Maggie's lips parted in a slow smile, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. Now we wait. We wait for things to unfold. There are more pieces to this puzzle, Terry. Much more. And you're going to help me put them together. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and for the first time since I woke up, I felt the full weight of what she was saying. I was in over my head. There was no way out of this, no way to turn back. The room seemed to grow colder as Maggie leaned in, her breath brushing against my ear. And you'll want to help, won't you, Terry? Because in the end, it's always the broken ones who want to fix things. But this is beyond fixing. I closed my eyes, trying to block out her words, trying to make sense of the madness that had unfolded in the span of just a few days. But there was no sense to be made. There never had been. And as I lay there, trapped in a bed that felt more like a prison, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. I wasn't just a victim in this story, I was a participant. Story 4: A Curator of Souls. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was the first time I kept a napkin from a cafe date, a little scrap of paper, a simple reminder of a fleeting moment I'd always been drawn to memories. Some people take photographs, but I collected pieces of the people themselves. It started small: a receipt from a restaurant, the edge of a ticket stub, little things that no one would miss, things that at first glance seemed entirely normal. But over time it grew. I didn't just want the things they left behind. I wanted to capture the essence of the people, the parts of them that lingered even after they had walked away. The first real item I took was from her, Jenny. She was the kind of woman who left things behind: a bracelet, a lip gloss, a jacket on the back of a chair. She never noticed when I took these things, never noticed when the little things slowly disappeared from our dates. I never told her. I didn't need to. It was a secret that made her feel closer, like she was always there with me, even when she wasn't. The collection grew over time. Each relationship, each encounter, each kiss, and every parting. A lock of hair here, a fingernail clipping there. It was never anything too grotesque, just intimate and personal. The things people left behind, in their hurry, their distractions, their haste to forget. At some point, I began to categorize them, label them. Each jar contained a memory: Sarah's smile, Michelle's laugh, Amber's perfume. I could pull a jar from the shelf and hold it up, feeling the weight of a past life in my hands. It was like holding time itself, each collection representing a chapter of my history frozen in amber. But Claire, she was different. From the moment I met her, I knew she would challenge me. She was observant in a way that made me uncomfortable, always looking just a little too closely. Every glance, every conversation felt like she was peeling back layers. I didn't want to show. I didn't trust her. Not at first. Not completely. She was meticulous. Everything about her controlled, from the way she dressed to the way she kept her apartment. I remember the first time I visited her place. It was immaculate. It felt sterile, almost too perfect. There were no stray papers lying around, no abandoned cups or receipts tucked between couch cushions. It was as if she had already anticipated everything I might leave behind. It frustrated me. It unsettled me. There was nothing of hers that I could claim, nothing to keep as a memento of our time together. No way to mark her as mine, even for just a little while. I tried. I made excuses to visit her apartment, lingering just long enough to see if I could slip something into my pocket. A hairbrush, a forgotten pen, a napkin from the cafe across the street, anything that would allow me to keep her close even when she wasn't there. But Claire's space remained perfectly tidy, too controlled. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a single thing I could add to my collection. I needed to know why. I needed to understand her, to figure out what it was about her that kept me at a distance. It was a Friday night when it happened. We were sitting on her couch, a documentary playing on the screen, the soft hum of the television filling the quiet. The documentary was about obsession, the dangers of collecting things, the twisted compulsion of keeping trophies of the past. It was a theme that caught my attention, and as I watched, I felt a chill creeping down my spine. There's something fundamentally wrong with people who collect trophies. Claire said, her voice soft but steady. It's as if they're trying to keep something alive that isn't. As if the collection itself is a way to defy time, to hold on to things that were never meant to be held. I tried to laugh it off to keep the mood light. Yeah, but isn't there a kind of beauty in remembering the good times? In keeping a little piece of someone with you? She turned to look at me, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, something cold, something calculating. But it was gone before I could be sure. You're not really remembering, though you're just trying to own the past. And sometimes, when you do that, the past owns you. I don't know why, but I felt a pang of unease, like she had somehow seen through me, had figured out what I was doing, what I was collecting. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow toying with me, that she knew more than she was letting on. Later that night, when she had fallen asleep on the couch, I crept around her apartment, looking for something, anything that I could take. Her apartment was so neat, so pristine, but I had to try. There had to be something. I found nothing. Her bathroom, as expected, was immaculate. The trash was empty, the shelves lined with neatly arranged bottles of lotion and perfume, all untouched. Her closet was organized by color, every item folded perfectly. It was like she had taken steps to prevent any trace of herself from being left behind. But then I saw it. A single strand of her hair caught on the edge of the pillow. It was delicate golden in the dim light, the kind of thing that would be so easy to slip away with. A perfect addition to my collection. My heart pounded as I reached for it, careful not to wake her. I was just about to tug the hair free when her eyes snapped open. "You're really trying to take something from me, aren't you?" she said, her voice sharp, almost accusing. I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My pulse was racing, my hand still hovering above her hair. "Claire, I stammered. She didn't let me finish. She sat up and smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile you give when you know you've already won. "Do you think I don't see you? Do you think I don't know what you're doing?" Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but it held a chilling edge. "You think you're the only one who collects things, the only one who has learned to hold on to people." I stood there paralyzed as she got up and walked toward her closet. She pulled open a drawer and revealed something that made my blood run cold. A box, carefully wrapped in old newspaper. She opened it slowly, as if savoring the moment. Inside were photographs of me. Some I didn't even remember being taken. There were pictures of me at different stages of my life. Some as a child, some from my early 20s. There were even photos I didn't recognize, pictures of me that I couldn't explain. And then, in the bottom of the box, there were more things, fragments, pieces of my life, fingernail clippings, a lock of hair. I took a step back, my breath coming in short gasps. "What the hell is this?" Claire's smile widened. "You're not the only one who likes to collect things. I prefer to keep the whole specimen, though." That's when I understood. She didn't just collect memories, she collected people. And I was about to become just another piece in her collection. I woke up to silence, the kind of silence that you only notice when something isn't right. It was a silence that lingered long after Claire had slipped back into bed beside me. Her breathing steady, her presence too calm, too perfect. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, my mind racing, replaying the moment she caught me, the cold edge of her voice, the knowing smile that spread across her face. What had she meant when she said she preferred the whole specimen? What did she mean by collecting people? I tried to shake it off. My brain was overreacting. She was just messing with me. It was a weird joke, that's all. She had to be kidding, but I couldn't let go of the image of the box. She'd shown me those photographs, the clippings of my own hair things I hadn't even remembered she had taken. There were pictures from moments I couldn't explain, from times I didn't even recall her being there. How had she gotten them? How could she have known all of that? I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The morning light broke through the window, casting an uncomfortable glow across the room. I could feel Claire beside me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. It felt like there was something wrong with her now, something that had slipped past the facade I had so easily fallen for. When she woke up, she acted like nothing had changed. She smiled at me over breakfast, poured me coffee, and spoke about trivial things, how her plants were doing, how her sister had sent her an email. The same soft, gentle tone she always used, the same calm presence, but something was different. The tension between us was unbearable, pressing against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake off. I had to know more. I had to understand what she was, Claire. I said, trying to sound casual, my voice tight with unease, "Can I ask you something?" She looked up from her cup, her eyes wide with that innocent curiosity she always wore so well. "Of course, what's on your mind?" I hesitated for a moment. "About last night, the box. What was that about? The photos, the pieces of me." She didn't blink, didn't even flinch. Her eyes didn't hold any trace of guilt or uncertainty. "I thought you'd understand by now," she said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. People leave pieces of themselves behind, whether they mean to or not. Sometimes it's just a memory, a photograph. Other times it's more. I echoed, leaning forward, trying to find any trace of humor in her voice. I found none. She set her coffee cup down and folded her hands neatly in her lap. "You know how people collect things, right? Some collect books, some collect art. But there are others, like me, who prefer to collect people." My stomach lurched, my breath hitched in my chest. "You're not serious?" I muttered more to myself than to her. "Oh, but I am..." Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper, as if she was sharing a secret with me. "You've been collecting bits and pieces of your past, haven't you? Little tokens, reminders of those you've loved or thought you loved. But that's not what I'm after. I want the whole thing, the essence of a person." I couldn't breathe. I felt like the walls of her apartment were closing in on me, pressing against me with an unbearable weight. She stood up then, moving gracefully to the bookshelf. She pulled out a glass vial, its surface smooth and cold, and held it in her hands. "This," she said, "is where the real collection begins. This is what I've been collecting." I stared at the vial, a sense of dread filling every corner of my mind. Inside the vial was nothing. It was empty, but the way she held it so reverently, so carefully, it felt like it contained something far more dangerous than I could comprehend. "It's not what you think," Claire said, sensing my confusion. "You see, a person doesn't leave just memories behind. No, they leave themselves, their soul, their being. I'm able to preserve that, to keep it. It's the ultimate collection." I couldn't swallow. I felt the room spin, the walls tilting at strange angles. What was she saying? I tried to laugh. This is a joke, right? You're just messing with me." She shook her head, her eyes colder than I had ever seen them. "You think I'm joking?" she asked, her voice like ice. "You think I'm just some quirky woman with a strange hobby. No, what I do is far beyond a hobby. It's the only way to truly capture someone, to hold them, to keep them, I've perfected it over the years. I took a step back, my mind struggling to process her words. You're telling me you've taken people's souls? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the back of the room to a small wooden cabinet that I hadn't noticed before. She opened it slowly, and I saw, there inside the cabinet, rows of vials, each one holding something that looked almost like liquid, but was too still to be anything natural. She pulled one out, and as she held it up to the light, I could make out a shadow inside. A shadow that wasn't quite solid, but pulsed with a strange, eerie glow. These, she said, are my collection. Each one holds a piece of someone, and every one of them is aware. Alive, trapped in the vial, aware of their existence but unable to escape. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The beat so loud I was certain she could hear it too. What happens to them? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Are they suffering? Her lips curved into a smile, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was cruel, predatory. Oh, they feel everything. They're trapped in a prison of their own making, unable to move, unable to speak. But they're aware of the world outside of everything that happens as time goes by. I've learned to preserve them in the perfect state, kept forever, just as they were, even as the world around them continues to turn. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred as I stumbled backward, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Was this some kind of sick joke? Was she telling the truth? You're not real, I muttered, shaking my head. This is a nightmare. This can't be real. Claire didn't react, didn't flinch. She just watched me, her eyes empty of any trace of humanity. It's real, all right, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. And now that you know, you'll join them. I stumbled backward, panic rising in my chest like a tidal wave. I had to get out. I had to escape. But as I turned to run, I felt something cold, something unnatural touch my arm. My breath caught in my throat. Her fingers were ice-cold sharp and unyielding, and as she slowly turned me around to face her, I saw the truth in her eyes. I told you I collect people, Claire said, her smile widening. But you won't be a scrap of memory. You'll be part of my collection. The whole specimen, just like all the rest. And in that moment I understood. I had walked into her trap, and now it was too late to escape. It didn't take long for the first cracks to appear in my mind, the fractures in my thoughts widening with every passing hour, every endless minute in that room with Claire. I remember the moment I understood just how much she had done to me, how deeply embedded she was in my life, in my thoughts. It wasn't just her presence in the room anymore. It wasn't just the way she smiled at me like she knew things I didn't, things I would never understand. It was her ability to make me feel small, insignificant, trapped. I never used to be someone who was easily manipulated, or so I thought. I'd always prided myself on my sense of control for Claire. She shattered that illusion with one sentence. You're in my collection now. I tried to laugh it off. Just a game, I told myself. Just her being quirky again, but then she reached for the vial she had shown me earlier. The glass gleamed under the dim light of her apartment, and when she held it up to the light, I could see it, could feel it, somewhere deep in my chest. A presence, a weight, the same oppressive feeling I had gotten in the moments before a storm breaks, that quiet sense of inevitability, that something terrible is coming, and there's no escaping it. Claire stared at me, her eyes unblinking, as if she could see right through me, as if she already knew everything I was thinking. And maybe in a twisted way she did. You don't believe me, do you? She asked, her voice almost too sweet. too calm. I see it in your eyes. You're wondering how this happened. You're wondering why you can't just leave. I didn't answer. There was no answer to give. What could I say to her? How could I tell her that the walls around me felt like they were closing in? That I could already feel my mind beginning to splinter into pieces? That everything about me was unraveling in the face of the impossible thing she had shown me? Claire's smile widened as though she knew exactly what I was thinking. You think you can leave, she said softly, but you can't. You're part of the collection now, and just like the others, you'll stay. Watch forever. I recoiled, my heart thudding wildly in my chest. What do you mean? Forever? I choked out. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed the vial back on the shelf. The sound of the glass clinking softly, reverberating through the room. She turned to face me, her posture serene, as though she were a teacher, imparting some cruel lesson to a student who had finally grasped the depths of their failure. You think you're the first one I've done this to? She asked, her voice low, almost mocking. You're not. You're just the latest. I've perfected it over time. The collection grows, and you'll never escape it. No one ever does. I felt my throat close up, the words choking in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Her presence suffocated me. Every breath I tried to take felt as though it was being drawn from a place too far too distant. Her words began to echo in my mind, over and over again. You'll stay, watch forever. I felt my body freeze in place, unable to move, unable to tear my eyes away from the shelves. The vials. Each one of them contained someone, something. Someone who had once been alive, who had once walked freely, but who was now a part of her collection, trapped for eternity. How could I escape? Could I even try to escape? A part of me, deep buried within, began to contemplate it. I wasn't going to give up that easily. There had to be a way out. But then I remembered the strange moments with Claire. The small things that had seemed so insignificant before, but now appeared so different in the light of what I had just learned. How she knew things she shouldn't have known. How she always seemed to be one step ahead. The photographs of me, taken at times I never recalled her being around. The strange pieces of me, my hair, my fingernails, trinkets, of a past I thought I had discarded. It had all been a lie. Every single moment, every touch, every laugh, every smile. She had been collecting me. She had been planning this, waiting for the right moment to make me a part of her collection. But what was the point? What was the purpose? I could sense a deeper meaning behind her actions, but I couldn't quite grasp it. I couldn't pull the thread and untangle the mess of emotions and thoughts that were flooding my mind. And that's when she did something I hadn't expected. Claire reached for her phone, held it out to me and pressed a button. On the screen, I saw it. A photograph of me, my younger self standing in front of an old cafe. I could barely recognize the person in the picture, but I knew it was me. This is when I first saw you, she said, her voice calm, even affectionate. You were so unaware, so open, just like you are now. I didn't understand. Why was she showing me this? What did it mean? She tapped the screen again, and another photograph appeared. This one was of me at a park, laughing with a woman I didn't recognize. I was holding hands with her, a smile stretched across my face. But the strangest thing, Claire was in the background of that picture. Her face partially obscured by the trees, just barely visible. You've never noticed me before, have you? Claire asked softly. But I've always been there in the background, collecting you piece by piece. Every moment, every touch, every glance. I felt my stomach churn. The dizziness returned swirling in the pit of my gut. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but stand there and listen to her. But I couldn't move. I couldn't break free from the grip she had on me. "You're mine now," she said again, the words echoing in my mind. "And nothing you do will change that. You will stay here in my collection forever. And when the time comes, I will add another piece to you. Another memory, another moment, and you'll watch. You'll always watch." I could hear the sound of my own heart beating, thudding in my ears like a drum. Each word she spoke, each gesture she made, felt like it was breaking me down, bit by bit. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why do you do this? Why me?" Her eyes softened just a little. "Because, darling, I'm a curator, a collector. I collect the things that matter the most, and you, my dear, matter to me more than you'll ever understand." The last part of her sentence clung to the air, suffocating me. I wanted to run, but where could I go? The walls were closing in around me. The glass vials gleamed on the shelves, each one a reminder of someone else who had once been like me, alive, free, and now nothing more than a specimen in her collection. And then, as I looked into her eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. "You'll understand soon enough," she whispered, almost lovingly. "But don't worry, I'll take good care of you. You'll be well preserved." Her words were soft, soothing even, but they chilled me to the core. I was no longer just a part of her world. I was a part of her collection, and there was no escape. Story 5. The Scream from the Bottom of the Swamp. I don't know how long I've been running. The forest around me feels like it's closing in. Trees crowding together, limbs reaching out like crooked fingers. My heart pounds in my chest, a drumbeat that seems to echo through the night air. Every step I take is one more towards something unknown, something I can't even begin to understand. I can't stop running. I won't stop. The sound of breaking branches behind me is the only thing keeping me moving. It's like someone is chasing me, pushing me to run faster, harder, to put more distance between us. But no matter how fast I go, the fear keeps crawling up my spine, sinking deeper into my bones. It's always there, just beneath the surface like a shadow I can't shake. The forest is thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting wood. It's colder now, late fall, maybe even early winter, and the chill bites into my skin, seeping into my muscles. My hands are raw from pushing through thorny bushes, from scraping against jagged tree bark. The blood on my palms stings as the wind cuts through the gaps in my jacket, making my breath come out in sharp, ragged bursts. I keep running, but the trees blur together in the dark, and I lose track of the path, the familiar sense of direction fading with every step. The undergrowth is thick here, and my foot catches on something, a root, a stone. I don't know, and I fall, hitting the ground. Hard. Pain shoots through my knee, but I don't stop. I can't. There's something behind me, something that wants to catch me. I push myself to my feet, ignoring the way my knee buckles beneath me. I stagger forward, the sound of the forest around me, now muffled, replaced by the dull thump of my own heartbeat. The trees begin to thin, and the ground softens beneath my feet. My boots sink into the earth, the mud clinging to my soles, making each step heavier than the last. I keep moving, though I have no choice. The swamp isn't far off. I realize the air smells different here, more brackish, like stagnant water, like something rotten. My feet slip in the mud, and I feel myself slowing down, the weight of exhaustion dragging me under. But there's no time to stop, no time to think. The sound of rustling behind me grows louder, more frantic. I don't dare look back. My breath comes in short bursts now, every inhale ragged and painful. I can hear something moving through the trees, but it's not the wind. It's too deliberate, too purposeful. Something is closing in on me. I push harder through the mud, my legs shaking with every step. The swamp spreads out in front of me, a vast murky expanse of water and reeds. The ground is soft here, and my foot sinks deeper than I expect. My ankle twists painfully, and I stumble, barely catching myself. The sound of splashing behind me is enough to make my stomach lurch. I can't let it catch me. I won't let it. The mangroves loom ahead, their twisted roots poking up from the water like skeletal hands. I make for them, my body screaming in protest. But I don't stop. I have to hide. I have to survive. The water is cold, and I gasp as I wade through it. The mud sucking at my legs with each step. The mangrove roots are slippery, slick with decay, but I force myself between them, curling up as small as I can. The swamp is silent for a moment, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you feel like you're underwater. I don't know how long I've been hiding, but it feels like hours. The cold seeps into my bones, and my limbs are stiff. My fingers numb. My breathing is shallow now, every inhale coming in short, erratic gasps. My chest aches from the cold, from the fear, from everything I try to hold, still to quiet the rapid thumping of my heart. But it's impossible. In the distance I hear something, footsteps maybe, or something heavier, like the ground itself shifting. My body tenses, every muscle ready to spring into action. The air feels thicker now, like the swamp is alive, breathing in time with my racing heart. The sounds of the forest, the chirps of insects, the rustle of small animals have all stopped. The quiet is absolute, unnerving. I swallow hard, my mouth dry, the salt water on my skin stinging. I can feel it, something moving in the darkness. It's not just the swamp, it's something else, something worse. My mind races, trying to make sense of what's happening. I think about running, about finding a way out, but my legs feel like they're made of lead. I can't move. I don't know if I can. Every instinct tells me to stay hidden, to wait, to be quiet. But the waiting is torture. The longer I remain here, the more I feel the weight of my own panic creeping in. I close my eyes for a moment, trying to calm myself, trying to stop my thoughts from spiraling out of control. Help me, I think, over and over, the words repeating like a prayer. But there's no one out here, no one who can hear me. The ground rumbles faint at first, but it grows louder. The vibrations making the water shift. The roots of the mangroves trembling. My stomach flips, my heart lurches. Something is coming. It's closer now. The trees around me creak, and I hear a sharp snap like something breaking. Then another boom. It's closer this time. I don't dare move. I don't dare make a sound. The noise reverberates through the swamp, through the earth beneath me, and I feel it deep in my chest. Something is coming for me. The animals are gone now. The only sounds are the distant rumble and the quick, shallow breaths I can't seem to stop taking. I hear it again, closer, almost on top of me. My throat tightens as tears sting my eyes. I try to hold still, but it's impossible. I can't breathe. I can't think. The only thing in my mind is help me, a mantra, a desperate plea that means nothing in the face of what's coming. I feel the earth tremble beneath me, and then I hear it. A scream. The kind of scream that comes from deep inside, the kind of scream that shatters everything. But it's not mine. It's coming from somewhere in the swamp, somewhere in the dark, and it's getting closer. I can feel my teeth chattering before I even realize it. The sharp clicks like tiny splinters against the stillness of the swamp. I try to stop them to control it, but the cold inside me is too deep, too all-encompassing. The chill of the night before winter is gnawing at me, sinking into my bones with a relentless hunger. My muscles are stiff, my hands trembling violently as I try to keep them still, trying to fight the urge to shiver, to make no sound. I want to scream. I want to break the silence that suffocates everything around me. But I know if I make a sound, if I even breathe too loud, I'll be found. I'll be finished. I can't stop thinking about the scream, the one that shattered the air like glass, splintering everything in its path. It came from the swamp. I know it did, but it didn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else, something ancient, maybe something that shouldn't exist. And it was close, too close. I can still hear it, echoing in my head, as though it's still hanging in the air, vibrating in the spaces between my breaths. The ground trembles again, a distant boom that rattles the roots beneath me. My fingers dig deeper into the mud, and I force myself to stay silent and not flinch. I need to hold on. I need to stay hidden, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid that the longer I stay here, the worse it will get. I've been in this spot too long, and the cold is seeping into my chest now. My lungs feel tight, as if the weight of the swamp is pressing down on me, making it harder to breathe. My thoughts are slowing, muddling together, and I know it's because of the exhaustion, the fear. The terror is so heavy, so thick, that it clogs everything in my mind. It's like I'm drowning in it, suffocating on nothing but fear. I try to steady my breathing, but each exhale is too loud, too sharp. Every time I think I found a rhythm, I hear something else. Another boom, closer this time. It shakes the earth beneath me and I almost lose my balance. The vibrations are unmistakable. Something is moving. Something large. I have to remind myself to breathe, to stay quiet. I have to survive this. The mangrove roots around me creak and groan, swaying slightly as though the swamp itself is alive. The air smells thick with salt and decay. It's too still, too quiet. The usual sounds of the swamp, the croaks of frogs, the rustling of leaves are gone. Nothing moves except for the ripples in the water, which is slowly creeping higher around my legs. I feel the cold wetness pressing against my thighs, now the mud sticking to my skin, making every movement slower, harder. I close my eyes for a second, trying to block out the feeling of panic creeping up my throat. It's getting harder to keep my thoughts from spiraling, harder to ignore the sense that I'm being watched. I can feel it, a heavy gaze from the dark. I don't know who, what it is, but I know it's there, just beyond the reach of my vision. My mind races, the thoughts slipping like wet fingers around a bar of soap. I shouldn't have come out here. I shouldn't have been so careless. This was a mistake. This whole night, this whole everything was a mistake. The rumbling returns louder now, and I know without a doubt that whatever it is, it's coming closer. I brace myself against the mangrove roots, trying to hold myself still, to make myself smaller, as though that will somehow make me less noticeable, less vulnerable. The air feels different now, thicker, heavier. The world seems to shrink, narrowing to the small space where I hide my back, pressed against the twisted roots of the mangrove, my knees drawn to my chest. I try to make myself as small as possible. I can't risk making a sound, but the ground trembles again. It's not distant this time. It's close. The vibrations make my teeth rattle again, and I have to force myself to stay quiet. The air is so thick now that I feel like I can't breathe. It's like something's pushing down on me, squeezing the life out of me with every passing second. And then the sounds begin again. Footsteps slow, deliberate crunching through the mud. Heavy, but not like a person. The sound is too wrong, too unnatural. It's dragging itself through the swamp. Something huge, something monstrous. The vibrations grow stronger with each step, each shift in the earth. I press myself further into the mangrove roots, closing my eyes tight, as if that will somehow protect me. I've never felt so small, so insignificant. The weight of the world is pressing down on me, and I don't know how much longer I can hold out. The cold is burning now, coursing through my body, eating away at my strength. My fingers are numb, my body trembling so hard. It's a miracle I'm not shaking the roots around me. The footsteps are getting closer. The earth beneath me feels like it's pulsing with each movement, each thud of whatever is making its way toward me. The air is suffocating, filled with the weight of something coming for me. I can hear it now, its breath slow, labored like something dragging itself through the swamp. It's not human. It's not anything I've ever encountered. I try to calm myself, but it's no use. My thoughts are scattered, slipping out of my control. My pulse is deafening in my ears, thundering like the footsteps approaching me. And then I hear something else. A hiss. A low guttural sound, like the air being forced through a throat that isn't quite right. It makes my skin crawl. The sound so foreign, so wrong, that I feel bile rise in my throat. I bite my lip to keep from making a sound, my body going cold, too cold to move, too cold to do anything but wait. The footsteps stop. The world holds its breath. The hiss comes again, closer this time. It's almost like it's sniffing the air, testing it. Searching for me, I want to scream. But the terror clamps down on my throat, choking the words before they can escape. I'm frozen. I don't dare move, not even an inch. Then I hear something that makes my heart stop. Something that makes every muscle in my body tighten, every instinct scream at me to run. A low, guttural laugh. It's not a human laugh. It's too deep, too unnatural. It echoes through the swamp, bouncing off the trees, the mangroves, as though it's coming from all around me. And then the worst part, it stops. The world is silent again. The footsteps are gone. The hissing is gone. But I know it's still here. I can feel it. I can feel it watching me. I don't know how much time has passed since the laugh, if it could even be called that. It was a sound too deep, too hollow to be from anything human. It echoed through the swamp, like it was coming from the earth itself, bouncing off the water, the trees, the mangroves. The instant it stopped, everything went still. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and I felt the weight of silence descend upon me like a blanket. The only thing I could hear was the ragged sound of my own breath, shallow and quick, as I tried desperately to keep it silent. I don't know why I'm still hiding. I should be running, shouldn't I? I shouldn't be sitting here trembling in the mud and the salt water waiting, but my legs are too weak, my body too cold. It's like the swamp itself is holding me here, wrapping its fingers around my chest and squeezing, making it impossible to move. The rumbling continues, not as loud as before, but enough to remind me that whatever it is, it's still out there. It's still waiting for me, tracking me. Each boom that shakes the ground seems to sink deeper into my bones, like the vibrations are part of something far larger, something far older than I could ever understand. My mind drifts. It drifts to thoughts of escape, of what might happen if I run. The swamp is vast, endless. I could move, slip through the trees and the mud, but would I be able to outrun it? Would I even know where to go? I couldn't even find my way out of the forest earlier, and that was before the ground started shaking, before the unnatural laugh, before everything began to fall apart. I feel a tug in my chest, like something's pulling me down, dragging me deeper into the muck. The cold water lapping against my legs seems to rise a little higher, creeping up toward my waist, then my ribs. It's like the swamp is alive, breathing, moving beneath me. My legs are becoming numb, and I can feel the sharp edges of the mangrove roots digging into my back. But the pain is a comfort, something real to hold on to. I close my eyes for a moment. I know I shouldn't, but the exhaustion is so much. The cold is so much. The fear is suffocating. I want to rest. I want to sleep. But I know what happens. If I fall asleep now, I won't wake up. I'll be found before I even have the chance. I force my eyes open again, focusing on the mangrove roots above me. The twisted trunks and branches seem to stretch up forever. The shadows heavy and thick. I keep expecting to see something moving in those shadows. A shape, a figure, something just out of sight. But there's nothing. Nothing but the constant ominous rumbling that shakes the ground beneath me. And then I hear it. A splash. A single sharp sound that echoes through the swamp like something heavy. Landing in the water, it's faint, distant, but unmistakable. I freeze my heart, hammering in my chest. The animals which had been silent for what seemed like hours stir. The croaks of the frogs, the rustling of the reeds, the faint buzzing of insects. Everything comes alive at once, but it's a discordant chorus, a nervous, frantic sound, as if the swamp itself is on edge. My mind races. I don't know if it's the thing I'm hiding from, if it's getting closer, or if it's something else. Maybe it's just an animal, maybe it's just a bird or some other swamp creature. But I know better. Whatever it is, I can feel it. I can feel its weight in the air, the way it presses against my chest, like a 1,000-pound weight. I hold my breath, hoping that if I remain still enough, quiet enough, it won't notice me. It won't find me hiding here, crouched in the darkness beneath the roots. I can't help but wonder if it's closer than I think, if it's already too late. The splash comes again, louder this time, closer. The water ripples outward, sending waves of movement through the stagnant swamp, disturbing the stillness. I squeeze my eyes shut, my heart racing. My breath comes in short gasps, the cold air stinging my lungs as I try to stay as quiet as possible. I can't hear anything now. Nothing but the steady thrum of my own blood rushing through my ears. I start to feel dizzy, disoriented, like the world is shifting beneath me. The silence drags on, and I realize I haven't moved in what feels like an eternity. The swamp is still, the air thick and suffocating, and then another sound. This time, it's unmistakable. A growl, low and guttural, rumbling through the air like a storm rolling in. It's not far off. It's right there. I can hear it moving through the water. Its steps slow, but deliberate, heavy, like it's searching. I try to move, to push myself up from the ground, but my limbs feel like lead. I can't feel my legs, my arms. The cold has seeped too deep into my muscles, numbing them. I try to force my body into action. But everything feels wrong. The water, the mud, the air. It's like I'm trapped in some terrible dream where nothing works. Nothing moves the way it should. The growl comes again, louder now, closer. It's coming from the edge of the mangroves. I feel it in my chest. The vibration of its voice, the terrible sound that makes my skin crawl. I want to scream, I want to run. But my body betrays me. I can't move. I don't know how much time passes. Minutes, hours. The rumbling continues, more persistent, now more frequent. The ground shakes again, sending a fresh wave of panic through me. Something is moving through the swamp. Something is hunting me. I can't think. My mind is racing, my heart pounding. I try to steady my breath, but it's impossible. My body is shaking uncontrollably, like I've been doused in ice water. I tell myself that I can't fall asleep, that I can't let my guard down. If I close my eyes, just for a moment. Suddenly, I hear a snapping sound, a branch breaking underfoot, and then the soft, wet sound of something wading through the water. It's so close now, so unbearably close. I hold my breath again, squeezing my eyes shut, praying it doesn't find me. The sound of it, moving its heavy steps in the water, is enough to make my skin crawl, enough to send a wave of nausea rising in my throat. I can hear its breath now, harsh, labored, like it's getting closer, like it's reaching for me. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the sound stops. The growl fades away and the water stills. I don't dare open my eyes. I don't dare breathe. The silence is so thick I can almost taste it. I wait. I wait for what feels like forever. And then I hear it. A whisper. A voice soft and distant, carried on the wind. But it's not a voice I recognize. It's not even a language I know. And in that moment I realize one thing. Whatever's out there, it's not just hunting me. It's waiting. Waiting for me to move. Waiting for me to make the wrong choice. I don't know what to do. Story 6. The Thing in the Woods. The day had been cold. The kind of bitter chill that makes your fingers ache and your breath come out in clouds of steam. It wasn't a surprise. After all, it was November in northern Michigan, and the woods were starting to turn into a frozen wasteland. The trees, bare of leaves, stood like ghostly sentinels, their skeletal branches twisted in strange patterns, as if reaching out to grab you. The snow had started to fall thick and heavy. But I didn't care. I had a job to do. I was a hunter. Been doing it all my life. And there's nothing quite like the rush of tracking a big buck through the woods. This wasn't my first time out this season. I'd been sitting in the tree stand for hours already, my breath steady and quiet, waiting for that perfect shot. The woods were still, save for the occasional rustle of a small animal in the underbrush, or the whisper of wind through the branches. I had my rifle with me. Remington 700, the weight of it, comforting against my shoulder as I peered through the scope, scanning the distant trees. The light was fading, and I knew I was running out of time, but I wasn't in a rush. If anything, the quiet was making me restless, making my nerves tighten. The only thing to break the monotony was the soft, constant crunch of snow under my boots as I shifted my position ever so slightly. Then out of nowhere, I heard it. A giggle. At first I thought it was a trick of the wind, or maybe the sound of something small like a squirrel or a bird making an odd noise, but no. This was too clear. It was a child's giggle, high-pitched, innocent and playful. It sent a shiver up my spine, and for a moment I paused, trying to make sense of it. There was no one else out here, at least not that I could see. I waited, my eyes scanning the snowy woods, listening intently. The giggle came again, louder this time, more distinct. I felt my pulse quicken, a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. The giggle had a rhythm to it, almost as if it was waiting for me to react. And then it changed. The sound warped like something had suddenly taken control of it. The pitch lowered, deepening into something wrong. A hollow, unnatural sound that crawled down my spine, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I leaned forward in the tree stand, gripping my rifle tighter, my knuckles white against the cold metal. I'd heard stories, legends about strange things that could happen out here, things that didn't quite make sense. But I never believed in that stuff. This was the real world. This was just some trick, right? Some animal messing with me. But then, the giggle shifted again. It wasn't a giggle anymore. It was mocking me. The voice that came next was twisted, distorted, like it had been played through a broken speaker. It sounded like a child, at first, then quickly morphed into something darker, deeper, like a man trying to speak through the voice of a small girl. My stomach churned as I heard the words. It spoke, the voice, dripping with malice. "Daddy, is that you?" My heart stopped. I wasn't some new father, but I had a daughter. She wasn't with me here, not today, not out in these woods, but the voice sounded too familiar, too close. I swung the rifle around, scanning the ground below the shadows, stretching longer as the light continued to fade. The snow was falling faster now, swirling in gusts of wind, making it hard to see clearly. But I wasn't imagining things. Something was out there. A flicker of movement caught my eye. I shot my gaze toward it, my breath coming faster now. There between the trees, just barely visible, was something or someone moving quickly. The shape was too long, too distorted to be human. It was hunched over, almost like it was crawling on all fours. I froze. My blood ran cold, Daddy. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't a little girl's voice anymore. The voice was low and guttural, no longer mimicking innocence. It was a voice filled with hunger, with need, something primal and dark. My fingers tightened on the rifle. I had to act fast. I lined up my shot, aiming at the shape just barely visible in the trees. My breath slowed, the cold air biting at my skin as I prepared to pull the trigger. But as I squeezed, the creature darted out of view, faster than anything I'd ever seen. I cursed under my breath. My heart was racing now, adrenaline kicking in, and I swung the rifle around, trying to spot it again. But nothing. The woods were silent, too silent. The wind had died down, and all I could hear was the faint pounding of my own heart in my ears. Then, from behind me, I heard it again. "Daddy, come home." The voice sounded almost like it was coming from inside my head, but I couldn't think about that. I couldn't stop now. My eyes were darting everywhere, scanning the snow-covered ground, looking for any sign of movement. And then I saw it, a pair of eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Not the eyes of any animal I knew. They were human. Too human. I swung my rifle around and aimed, but the creature was already gone, disappearing into the trees like a shadow. I didn't hesitate. I climbed out of the stand as quickly as I could, my boots crunching in the snow as I made my way toward the truck. Every nerve in my body was on edge. My hands were shaking, but I didn't care. I had to get out of there. I had to get away from whatever the hell was out there. As I reached the truck, I glanced over my shoulder. The woods were empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I threw open the truck door and slid inside. My hands fumbled for the keys, my breath coming in short, frantic gasps. As I started the engine, I slammed the gear shift into drive, my foot pressing hard on the accelerator as I sped down the narrow road, the tires skidding slightly on the icy surface. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, my blood turned to ice. There, standing at the edge of the woods, was the thing. Its grin was wide and twisted, its eyes locked on mine. It wasn't moving. Just standing there, smiling that grotesque smile. I didn't stop. I couldn't. My hand shook as I pressed the pedal down harder, the engine roaring in protest as I sped away, the creature fading from view. But as I glanced back one more time, I saw it again, still standing in the same spot, smiling. And I knew then it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The drive home was a blur. My hands were slick with sweat, the steering wheel too cold under my grip, but I couldn't seem to feel it. My foot pressed down on the gas, without thinking, the tires biting into the snow and ice, sending the truck skidding in ways it shouldn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, stalking me. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, the white blanket of snow blending seamlessly into the dark horizon. The headlights cut through the night, but it was like the darkness was fighting back, pushing into the light like an unseen force. I kept my eyes on the road, but even that didn't feel safe. My rearview mirror caught my attention, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw movement. I blinked hard, shaking my head. No, I'm just imagining things. But the nagging thought wouldn't go away. I glanced again, my breath catching in my chest. Nothing, I thought. I was just rattled. Hell, who wouldn't be? But the weight on my chest didn't let up. I kept my foot pressed hard on the accelerator, the engine roaring like a beast as I tried to push the feeling out of my head. I told myself it was nothing. There was no creature, no thing, just my nerves getting the best of me. But then something flickered in the mirror again. It was there, that twisted, grotesque grin, the same haunting smile from the woods, now standing in the same place it had been, as if it had never moved. Its eyes, those dead, soulless eyes, locked onto mine once more. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't look away. I jerked the wheel to the side, swerving to avoid what felt like an incoming crash. The tires screamed against the road, the truck skidding dangerously across the icy surface. But I didn't care. I couldn't keep my focus on the road. The thing was, they're still smiling, still watching me. It's not real. It can't be real. But the more I told myself that, the more the fear sank into my bones. My pulse pounded in my ears, louder than the engine, louder than anything. I could hear its laughter again. Soft at first, then growing, echoing in my skull, like it was coming from inside my head. Is it in the truck with me? I gripped the wheel so hard, my hands started to cramp, but I refused to look in the mirror again. I couldn't. I didn't want to see it. But it felt like it was there, lingering, waiting, just outside the reach of my sanity. My breath came quicker now, my chest tightening with every beat of my heart. The road seemed endless. Every turn, every mile felt like a lifetime. I didn't know where I was anymore. The familiar landmarks from before had melted away, swallowed by the dark woods and the thick, suffocating snow. The road was a pale ribbon winding through the trees like a snake. Finally, I hit a stretch of open highway. It felt like I could breathe again. If only for a moment, I pressed harder on the gas, trying to escape the nagging feeling, trying to outrun whatever had been stalking me. But the quiet outside the truck was so absolute, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It felt like I was being followed by 1,000 eyes, each one waiting for me to slip up. The truck hummed steadily along the road, and that's when I heard it. The screech. I slammed my foot on the brake, the tires screeching against the ice as I fishtailed, fighting to keep control of the vehicle. The world outside spun in a blur of white and black, the headlights flashing off the trees, the snow. No. But the screech didn't stop. It was a high-pitched, sharp sound like something scraping across metal. My heart skipped a beat as I realized it was coming from the roof of the truck, the sound of claws scraping against steel. I slammed my foot on the brake again, stopping just in time to hear a low guttural laugh from above, a laugh that seemed to be both far away and right next to me. My breath caught in my throat as I fumbled for the door handle. I had to get out. I had to leave. The fear had turned into something worse, something primal, desperate, as if my very life was at stake. I turned the key in the ignition, but the engine sputtered. I tried again. Nothing. My hands shook as I tried to twist the key one more time, but it wouldn't turn. I looked up and out the windshield, half expecting to see that thing standing there again. Its twisted smile glaring through the glass, but it wasn't there. Nothing was there. I didn't wait. I jumped out of the truck, my boots sinking into the snow as I scrambled toward the woods. Not even sure why I was running, just knowing I couldn't stay in that truck. I didn't even check to see if the truck was still running. I didn't care. I ran the snow crunching beneath my feet, the cold biting at my skin as I pushed through the trees. It was all I could do to stay upright in the thickening snow, the wind tearing at my face like icy needles. The laughter echoed around me now, a constant presence that surrounded me. From every angle I could hear it in the wind, in the rustle of the branches. It was following me. Then came the footsteps, the unmistakable sound of something heavy and deliberate walking through the snow just behind me. Too close. I didn't dare look back. I pushed harder, adrenaline surging as my lungs burned from the cold air. But the thing was getting closer. I could hear it breathing deep, labored breaths like something trying to catch up to me. What was it? I had no idea, but I knew this. It wasn't human. The way it moved, the way it laughed, everything about it was wrong. It was like a thing from the dark, a creature that didn't belong in this world. I glanced over my shoulder once, just a brief flash of motion through the trees, a shape impossibly tall, standing just outside the reach of the trees, its body bent and twisted in unnatural ways. Its eyes locked onto mine for a second. Those eyes, hollow and black, consumed everything around them. It was real. I stumbled, tripping over a fallen log. My hands hit the snow, but I didn't stop. I pushed myself back to my feet and kept running, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't until I heard the crunch of something heavy landing on the ground beside me that I realized it wasn't behind me anymore. It was right next to me. I felt a hot breath on my neck. My whole body froze, and I didn't dare turn around. There was nothing in the world that could make me turn around and face it. I didn't even know if I could run anymore. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I was running on pure fear. Suddenly, there was silence. The footsteps, the breathing, the laughter, all gone. I stopped gasping for air, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, just out of sight, waiting. I didn't have time to think. I turned and bolted into the dark, running harder, faster, never looking back. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. All that mattered was getting away from it. But even as I ran, I knew I was being led somewhere, led right into its trap. The sound of the engine sputtering in the stillness of the night was enough to drive me insane. The truck had stalled the second I turned onto the old logging road, a road I had never, not once, in all my years, used. It had been hours since I'd seen that thing, but its eyes were still burning into my mind, making my hands shake as I twisted the key over and over. Why isn't it starting? It should have started. I'd seen the creature in my rearview mirror. That thing smiling at me like it had just won. My heart was still racing from the terror, but the panic was now replaced with something colder, something deeper, more primal, something I couldn't explain. Think, damn it. I shoved the gear shift into park and threw open the door. The cold was like a slap in the face as the truck's lights flickered off, leaving me standing alone in the pitch blackness. There was no moon tonight, no guiding stars, only the wind, the cold, and the weight of what had happened. The trees were thick pressed together, like soldiers at attention looming over the road, as if they were keeping something from escaping. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, my breath coming out in sharp puffs as I cursed under my breath. The truck wouldn't start. The engine just wouldn't turn over. For a moment, I considered walking back. I was close enough to the main road where I could at least get some service call for help, but that thought alone made my stomach twist. I'd been through enough already tonight, and the thought of going back into those woods of walking, right back into that thing's territory, felt like an open invitation for it to finish what it had started. But what choice did I have? The headlights cut through the darkness, barely making a dent in the thick blackness. The wind was picking up now, howling through the trees, and with it came the sound of something else, something that shouldn't have been there. Laughter soft, at first barely audible over the wind. I froze. It wasn't in my head. This was real. I recognized it, that laugh. The same one that had haunted me when I was running from the thing. The same one that seemed to have found its way into the very air I was breathing. It's not here. It can't be here. I clenched my fists, my breath coming out in quick bursts, my throat dry as sandpaper. But the laughter didn't stop. It grew slowly at first, but then louder, clearer. There was something wrong with it, something that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the sound of a laugh anymore. It had changed, morphing into something darker, more sinister. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. My eyes darted through the dark trees, but there was nothing, just the shapes of the branches swaying in the wind. Where is it? The air around me seemed to close in. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The sound of the laugh was louder now, like it was circling me, closing in, pressing against me from all sides. I spun again, my pulse quickening. It's coming. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The shadows seemed to shift in ways they shouldn't, the trees seeming to grow taller and lean toward me as if they were alive. Watching, I took a step back toward the truck, but my boots sank too deep into the snow. I was stuck, the cold creeping up my legs like ice, locking me in place. This isn't real. It's not real. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the laughter, the whispering that felt too close to my ear. When I opened them again, I saw movement, a flicker in the corner of my eye. Something moved through the trees. There was no mistaking it. It was it. The thing I saw, a flash of twisted limbs, unnatural and contorted like a body that had been ripped and rearranged in all the wrong ways. It moved with speed too quick for anything human. The laughter echoed again, now so close that I could feel it vibrate through my skull. My legs moved before I even realized it, the snow crunching beneath my boots as I ran toward the truck. My hands fumbled for the door, yanking it open, but I didn't get in. Instead, I slammed it shut, looking frantically for something, anything, to defend myself. My rifle. I'd left it in the cab when I jumped out to check the engine, idiot. The laughter stopped, but the feeling in the air didn't. I could still hear it, feel it circling just beyond my vision, lurking in the shadows. I turned around, eyes darting back and forth through the trees. But there was nothing that I could see. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, and stepped backward toward the truck. I didn't know where it was, but I couldn't stay out here. And then it came. A flash of movement, a shadow. It was standing at the edge of the trees. It was grinning at me. I almost dropped to my knees. The smile was wrong. Too wide for any mouth. And the eyes, God, those eyes. They were like pits, black empty holes that seemed to absorb the very light around them. It's not real. It's not real. I slammed the door of the truck open and grabbed the rifle. I didn't know what I was doing. My fingers were shaking so hard that the gun felt like it might slip from my hands. I aimed it blindly into the dark woods where that thing stood watching me with those hollow eyes, its smile stretching impossibly wide. Then I heard it, something that made my blood run cold. A voice, soft, Daddy. It was a whisper, but it cut through the air like a knife. I froze, the rifle trembling in my hands. It was it again. The thing, it had taken on the voice of my daughter. I didn't know how it knew how it could mimic her voice like that, but it wasn't my daughter. It was not her. I had seen enough tonight to know that. Please. The voice whispered again, a little louder. This time a little more insistent. I couldn't move. My hands were shaking so hard that the rifle was beginning to fall from my grip. My daughter, my little girl. She wouldn't be out here. She couldn't be. And yet, there was that voice again. Clearer now, mocking, pretending to be her daddy come back. The sound echoed through the woods, growing distorted, as if it was coming from somewhere far away and right next to me. All at once, I spun around, but it was too late. I was already out of time. The thing was closer now, stepping forward into the dim light of my truck. It was still grinning, still watching. Its smile was so wide that it nearly touched the sides of its face, the mouth stretching impossibly wide, its eyes. Those black, soulless pits were locked onto mine, and I couldn't look away. I could barely breathe. My chest was tight with fear. Daddy, come back. Come back to me. And then, just before I could raise my rifle and pull the trigger, it stepped into the light, fully revealing itself. It was a thing, no longer a person, no longer a figure pretending to be human. Its limbs were twisted, contorted, unnaturally long, the joints bending in ways they shouldn't. Its skin was pale, stretched tight over its bones. Its face, God. Its face was a mess of jagged, sharp teeth, and its grin was still too wide, stretching from ear to ear. And its eyes, those black eyes. I didn't wait. I raised the rifle, my finger trembling on the trigger, and then I pulled. But it wasn't enough. I fired, but the creature didn't flinch. It just smiled. And that's when I realized I wasn't dealing with something I could kill. Story 7, The Stench of Death. I never thought the end of the world would feel this quiet. You'd expect chaos, screams in the distance, alarms, blaring sirens, something. But here, in the middle of the city, it's just still. The air smells wrong, though a bit too heavy, too thick. It's like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something worse to come. I shouldn't be here, not alone, not like this. But there's nowhere else to go. I looked down the darkened hallway of my apartment building, the peeling wallpaper and cracked light bulbs giving everything a sense of rot. My mind keeps wandering back to Ellen, even though I promised myself I wouldn't think about her too much. Not like this. But it's hard to escape the memories, especially when I can still smell her perfume on the clothes she left behind. Before everything fell apart, it was just another normal Tuesday. Well, as normal as things could be in a world where nothing felt stable anymore. I remember how Ellen had looked that morning. There was something about the way she smiled at me over her coffee that day. Distant maybe. Or maybe I was just too distracted by the news on TV, the reports of people getting sick tearing into each other. You could tell by the anchor's voice that they didn't believe what they were saying, and then everything went wrong. Ellen had always been the strong one, the one who kept us grounded, who reminded me to breathe when I couldn't. But on that day, when I found her on the floor of our apartment, her arm bleeding from a bite, I froze. I still don't know if I hesitated, because I was scared, or because I knew what was coming. Either way, the terror crept up on me, wrapped around my chest like a vice. I should have done something sooner. I should have known. I should have protected her. But that's the thing I didn't. After the bite, things moved too fast. There was no time to think, no time to prepare. The infected came out of nowhere, swarming the streets, smashing windows, clawing at the air. By the time we realized it was a real threat, it was already too late. We barricaded ourselves inside the apartment, praying the walls would hold up, praying we wouldn't hear the sickening sound of a door being broken down. But we never saw them coming. Not at first. It was only when the screams outside became too much to ignore that we realized we had been living on borrowed time. I remember how Ellen looked when I told her she was infected. The fear that flashed in her eyes, the realization that she was becoming one of them. I had never seen her so vulnerable before. She fought it, of course. She said she didn't want to die like that. Not like those things outside our door. She didn't want to lose herself. But that's the thing about the infected. They don't give you a choice. The bite wasn't deep, but it was enough. The first signs were subtle. An aching in her joints. A little extra heat in her skin. At first, I thought it was just a shock reaction that she'd recover if she rested long enough. But I was wrong. She got worse faster than I could process. 1 minute, she was trying to hold a conversation with me, asking if we could find a way out, and the next, her eyes were glazed over the flesh of her arm turning purple mottled. The infection spread like wildfire, taking over her system. And then came the worst part. The waiting. We waited for the fever to break, for something to happen that would tell us if she could survive it. Every hour was torture. A ticking clock in the back of my mind. I kept thinking, if I could just find the right medicine, the right treatment, if I could just save her, she'd come back. But deep down, I knew the truth. The infection didn't care about hope. I hear it now. The sound of something scraping against the walls, distant but growing louder. My heart races, but I force myself to stay still. My fingers digging into the armrest of the couch. The only thing keeping me from crumbling into a heap on the floor. The apartment is dark, save for the weak light coming from the flickering bulb in the kitchen. I haven't seen sunlight in days. No reason to open the blinds anymore. There's nothing outside but chaos. And Ellen is in the next room when she asked me to promise her I didn't think I could do it, but she was so desperate. Her voice breaking with the weight of her fear. You have to end it, Michael. please. She hadn't been the same for days. Her eyes, once warm and alive, with that soft glow, were now clouded her skin. Cold to the touch, the transformation had begun. I could see it in the way she moved or didn't move now. Her body trembled as she tried to lift herself from the couch, a grotesque shadow of the woman I married. "You'll do it, won't you?" she asked, her voice so soft it almost didn't sound like her. There was a tear in the corner of her eye, one I couldn't wipe away. "Promise me, Michael." It wasn't a promise I wanted to make. I had thought of a dozen ways out of this, ways to save her to run and never look back, but there was no way out. I knew that as well as she did. The infection had already taken hold. Her body had become a prison, and there was no escaping it. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the thought of what's to come. If the infected outside don't get in it, won't matter, I won't let them have her. Not like this. The silence grows heavier in the apartment. I hear the scrape again, closer now. My eyes snap open, and I instinctively reach for the gun at my side, the one I never thought I'd have to use. It was meant to protect us, but now it feels more like a death sentence. Ellen's final wish. My hands are shaking as I grip it. My breath shallow, my heart pounding in my chest. I promised her, but I'm not ready for what's about to happen. None of us are the first time I shot someone. I didn't think I could live with myself. That was before everything changed, before I understood what it really meant to survive. But now I realize that it wasn't the violence that haunted me. It was the helplessness, the way the world had tilted off its axis, dragging everything I loved with it. I should have been prepared. I should have seen the signs before the infection spread as far as it did. But I wasn't. None of us were. In the early days before things went to hell, the news kept warning us about the virus. They called it a pandemic, a flu-like illness that spread fast. People panicked. They hoarded supplies, locked themselves in their homes, and waited for the worst to pass. But it never did. Ellen had tried to stay optimistic. She had this habit of holding on to hope even when everything around her was crumbling. She convinced me we'd be fine, that we just needed to wait it out, stay inside and be careful. We'd seen the news. Of course, we knew about the violence, the bloodshed in the streets, the reports of people going mad, but we didn't understand what it meant. We didn't understand how quickly it would come for us. I remember the first time I saw one of them, the infected. I didn't recognize the horror until it was too late. It was the night after the outbreak started. The apartment was eerily quiet, the TV flickering with static, and the air felt too heavy for comfort. I had just stepped out to grab some supplies. Ellen was too tired to move, so I left her behind thinking she'd be safe. I was wrong. As I made my way down the hallway of the building, the smell hit me first. It was the stench of rot, thick and cloying. It made my stomach churn, but I couldn't place where it was coming from. I thought I saw a figure in the distance hunched over its back to me. It didn't move. Not at first, but when I stepped closer, I could hear the sickening sound of gnawing. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped closer, my hand gripping the gun I had taken with me. I never imagined I'd actually use it, but that moment shattered whatever illusions I had left. The figure turned, and I saw its face. If you could call it a face, its eyes were wide, bloodshot pupils dilated, and its mouth was covered in blood. It wasn't human anymore. Not really. I pulled the trigger without thinking. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the halls, bouncing off the walls like thunder. The creature, if you could even call it that, collapsed onto the floor with a sickening thud. I stared at it. My breath caught in my throat. Its body twitched, and for a split second, I thought it might get back up, come after me, but it didn't. I stared at the thing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was this the infection? Was this what I was supposed to be afraid of? And then, as the adrenaline began to wear off, a horrible realization settled in. I had killed someone, or something that had once been someone. It didn't matter, I told myself. I didn't have time to worry about that now. But it stayed with me like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I hurried back to the apartment, but when I opened the door, I saw Ellen sitting up on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She looked different. Her skin had a strange pallor to it, and her eyes were unfocused. I knew the infection had progressed faster than I'd realized. I had hoped I was wrong, but deep down I knew. She turned to me with a slow, pained smile, her lips trembling. "Michael?" she whispered. "What's happening?" I didn't know how to answer her. What was happening? The world was collapsing around us, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I wanted to lie to her, tell her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't. I didn't know how to lie to her anymore. The truth was too terrifying. "I'm here, Ellen," I said, kneeling next to her. "We'll get through this. We'll survive." But even as I said the words, I knew it was a lie. Days passed in a haze. The world outside grew quieter, more distant. The infected continued to spread, and the once bustling city became a ghost town. The apartment was all we had left. I had sealed up the windows, locked the doors, and prayed we wouldn't hear the sounds of the infected coming for us. But deep down, I knew we couldn't hide forever. Ellen's condition worsened. She didn't speak much anymore, but when she did, her words were strained, almost frantic. Michael promised me she would say, her voice trembling. "Promise me you'll end it when the time comes. Promise me you won't let me turn." It was a promise I didn't want to make. How could I? How could I end the life of the woman I loved so much? The woman who had always been my strength, my anchor in this madness. But as her body deteriorated, as the infection took over, I knew what I had to do. The first time I truly saw her change, it hit me like a slap to the face. She was sitting on the couch, her hands twitching involuntarily, her body trembling with each shallow breath. I reached out to touch her, and she flinched. Her skin was cold to the touch, and I could feel the fever radiating off her. She stared at me with those dull, unblinking eyes. "I don't want to die like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, Michael." I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that somehow there was a cure, that we could fight this together. But I knew that was a lie. It had already taken hold of her. It was only a matter of time before the infection completely overtook her. And so I promised her. I promised I would end it when the time came. I wish I could say it was a relief that the promise somehow gave me a sense of purpose, but it didn't. It just made everything feel heavier. The weight of the world pressing down on me with each passing moment. The days blended together, each one indistinguishable from the last. I could feel the infected growing, closer, their growls and moans echoing through the building, and yet I couldn't bring myself to care. I just wanted it to end. And then it came, the moment I had been dreading. Ellen's body convulsed violently. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she let out a guttural, inhuman scream. I was at her side in an instant, holding her as she twisted in agony. Her skin was no longer the soft, warm skin I had kissed so many times. It was cold, clammy, and discolored. Her mouth opened wide, revealing the teeth that were no longer her own. Sharp and jagged, Michael. She gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Please end it. I looked into her eyes, and for a brief moment I saw the woman I had loved. But then it was gone, replaced by something darker, something monstrous. The promise hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I took a deep breath, steadying my shaking hands. There was no going back. Now I had to do this for her, and so I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening, and when it was over, all that remained was silence. The apartment is quiet now. Too quiet, the kind of silence that presses in on you from all directions, crawling under your skin, filling the empty space in your chest, where your heart used to beat with any hope at all. After everything, after the violence, after Ellen's death, it's just me alone. And I don't think I've ever felt more suffocated in my life. The room feels smaller now. The air is thicker. I don't know if it's because of the stench of death that still lingers from Ellen, or if it's just the weight of my own guilt that presses against the walls. Either way, I can't breathe. I'm sitting in my recliner, nursing a bottle of cheap vodka. It burns as it slides down my throat, but it doesn't numb the ache in my bones. It doesn't stop the images from flashing in my mind. Ellen's face, her desperate eyes before I pulled the trigger, the blood that stained my hands. I wish I could forget it, but I can't. I can't forget the way she looked at me, asking me to end it, to end her suffering. And I did. But the cost was more than I ever imagined. I hear the faint sounds of moaning outside the apartment, followed by the sickening scratch of something dragging along the hallway floor. It's them, the infected. They've been closing in for hours, maybe days. I don't know anymore. Time doesn't mean anything in here. It's all just waiting. It's strange. When the outbreak started, I thought I would be ready for this. I thought I would be prepared to fight back, to survive. But now, I just want it to end. The world outside is gone, consumed by madness and violence. The infected are everywhere. It doesn't matter how many times I check the locks, how many barricades I stack in front of the door. There's no escaping them. No escaping what's left of the world. I take another swig of the vodka, trying to force the thoughts out of my head. But they're persistent. They claw at me like the infected outside the door, relentless and unforgiving. Ellen is gone. And I killed her. The thought of her, what she used to be, is too much to handle. I can't think about her too much, or I'll break. But she was all I had. She was my world. And now that she's gone, there's nothing left for me. Nothing but the waiting. The waiting for the infected to come crashing through that door. The waiting for whatever's left of me to wither away in the dark. I should be afraid, I should be terrified. But I'm not. I'm numb. I don't feel anything anymore. It's like I've become a part of the silence. Like the air has swallowed me whole. The lights flicker overhead, casting a sickly glow on the walls. I feel my eyelids drooping. The exhaustion from days, or is it weeks of no sleep catching up with me? But I don't want to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see Ellen, her face contorted in pain, pleading for me to end it. The moment when I pulled the trigger, when her life slipped away in my hands. I can still hear the echo of it. The gunshot. The way her body jerked in my arms before she collapsed. It was supposed to be quick, painless, but it wasn't. It wasn't any of those things. The infected outside are getting closer. I can hear them, their guttural groans, They're slapping footsteps on the floor. They're out there, but it doesn't matter anymore. It won't be long now. Maybe they'll break through the door in minutes. Maybe hours, but I don't care. Let them come. I take another drink, my throat burning as the alcohol works its way through me. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. I keep thinking about Ellen, about what I did to her. I know it was the only thing I could do. She asked me to. She begged me. But that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make me feel better. I hear a loud thud from the hallway, followed by more, scraping, the unmistakable sound of something trying to break through. They're here. They're at the door. My heart skips a beat, but it's not fear that hits me. It's a kind of indifference, a numbness that has seeped into my very bones. I should be scared. I should be fighting to survive. But all I can think about is the promise I made to Ellen, and how I failed her. I remember the first time we moved in here. The apartment was small, but cozy. It had just enough space for the two of us, and it felt like home. Ellen was always the one to make it feel like a sanctuary. She'd fill the place with her laughter, with her warmth. She'd cook dinner, play our favorite music on the old record player, and tell me everything would be okay. I believed her back then. I believed we were safe. But that was before the world fell apart, before the infected started tearing through everything. I thought we could survive it. I thought we had a chance. But I was wrong. The thudding from the hallway grows louder, and I can hear the sounds of the infected. Those sickening, raspy breaths. It's like they're right outside the door. My hand tightens around the bottle of vodka, but I don't take another drink. I don't need it. It won't make any difference. The air is thick with anticipation. I hear them outside, clawing at the door, banging their fists against it. Their snarls and growls sending shivers down my spine. I wonder how long I can hold out. I wonder how much longer I can sit here, drinking away the hours before they break through. A sharp crash rings through the apartment, followed by the sound of splintering wood. The door they're in. I rise slowly from the recliner, my legs unsteady, my mind fogged by the alcohol and the weight of everything that's happened. I don't know why I stand. I don't know why. I don't just sit back down and let them come. But something pushes me forward. Something that feels like survival. Instinct, but it's different now. It's not about survival anymore. It's about ending it all. I grab the gun from the table, my fingers trembling as I hold it in front of me. The door is coming apart, piece by piece, as the infected push against it, their bodies slamming into the wood. I can hear the faint creak of the hinges as they strain under the weight of the assault. It won't be long now. I look at the gun, my fingers tight around the handle, and I realize something I don't care about surviving anymore. I don't care about the infected or the world or even the promise I made to Ellen. I just don't care. I'm done. The door bursts open and the infected pour into the room. Their eyes are wide, bloodshot, hungry, but I don't flinch. I don't move. I stand there, staring at them, waiting for whatever comes next. And then I pull the trigger. The shot rings out, deafening in the silence of the apartment. But I don't hear the sound of the bullet hitting its target. I don't hear anything.